In the heart of the state-of-the-art, at the dawn of the next stage in entertainment, you found No Proscenium.
You have indeed found No Proscenium, the voice of everything immersive. I'm Noah Nelson, and welcome to episode 399. This week, a very special, very long episode of the podcast featuring guest host Mikhael Tara Garver, the director of immersive experience for Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser, who's here to interview me, along with Kathryn Yu, Graham Wetterhahn, Jessica Creane, and Nick Fortungo, my shipmates, for the absolutely incredible surprise trip to Walt Disney World in Orlando to head aboard the Galactic Starcruiser that Graham and Kathryn organized for us and that a whole lot of people contributed to. Indeed, our coverage of the Starcruiser is brought to you by Agile Lens, bringing XR and theater together for over a decade, and After Hours Theater Company, producers of the Los Angeles Immersive Invitational, with additional support from listeners like you. More on that on the other side of the interview, about 2 hours and change from now. Now, before I do our usual bit about the state of the Patreon, I wanted to give you some extra context for this episode, including a very basic description of what the Starcruiser is and what this episode is. We'll start with what the Starcruiser is not. It is not a $5,000 a night hotel, nor is it really a hotel at all. But for a bunch of reasons that I can say with a clear conscience had nothing to do with the quality or the value proposition of the experience, it is something that is closing at the end of September. Speaking of that value proposition, the actual price is around $1,400 to $1,600 per person for the 2-day, 2-night run. That includes everything but fancy drinks and things from the gift shop. And yeah, they'll get you on that. That's the job of a resort. Now, about what it is. I joked while aboard that it really should have been called Star Wars Galactic Sleepover, because at the end of it, that's what it felt like. A 2-day adventure in a galaxy far, far away. One where everywhere you looked, you were in Star Wars. A special theme park land that felt like it had been made just for you and your friends, where they didn't force you to leave at the end of the night when it was time to go to bed. Oh no, you slept inside the park. A dream brought to life for anyone who ever wanted to pick up a lightsaber and be part of a larger universe. Also, no, it's not an actual cruise ship. You're not going anywhere. One of my friends asked me that. It just uses the shape and daily activity structure of a cruise ship, right down to the classic daytime excursion and the all-you-can-eat buffets, as a way of framing the story that plays out all around you and that you can hop into and out of as you see fit. Spoiler alert. Few ever hop out of the story. It's much too fun. Now, speaking of spoilers, in this episode, we are going to go deep on our adventure together, which means there are a lot of spoilers for the experience. If you're already set to go, you might want to listen later. If you think you want to try to go, you can seek out the Halcyon Rebels. Those are the people who helped us. Their goal is to help those who want to go learn the secrets to finding space on the ship when it becomes available. Who knows? Maybe you'll want to after this, or maybe you'll have had your fill of the Starcruiser by the time we're done. But again, the Halcyon Rebels, thank you so much. And you helped Kathryn do the work that made it all possible when it looked like there was no hope. Now, the conversation that follows dips between talking about our characters to inside baseball stuff about immersive and back again. It is very No Proscenium with a side of LARP war story. It is deeply nerdy in every sense of the word. It's also unlike anything we've done before. So a total experiment in every sense. Because this show will hit its 400th episode next week, and we're having fun with it. And this is brought to you by an incredible community of listeners on Patreon, where each $5 a month pledge gets us one step closer to where we need to be, fully self-sustaining. Hitting up patreon.com/NoProscenium not only powers the podcast and websites for NoPro and everything immersive, it also gets you into our member-only Discord. You'll find a whole community of creators and fans there, as well as regular real-time chats. We've got some AMAs and book clubs action coming up later this season. Some really fun stuff. If you're already a backer, don't forget to link your Patreon account to Discord and drop a review on iTunes or your podcatcher of choice. That stuff really helps. And share the articles you find useful on your social media platform of choice. It helps immensely. A great article for that this week is the call sheet for July of 2023, particularly if you're in July of 2023 when you're listening to this when it drops. There's a lot of important things going on right now. Some job opportunities, some festival deadlines, and other casting opportunities. Just a lot of stuff in there that can be really helpful to folks right now. Maybe not for you, but maybe for a friend of yours. So check out the call sheet. You can find it in the show notes. Look, we're always No Proscenium, except on Instagram and on Threads, where we are _Proscenium. I just said no _Proscenium. It's going too fast. What a shock. As always, big thanks to our sustaining backers, Samuel Mustry, Chris Woolman, Samantha Davison, Eric Shamlin, Elaine, Daryl, John Boulette, Jay Bushman, Jerome Joseph Gentis, Tom Leonetti McGuire, Kurt Collins, Hail the Visionary, Winthorn, Ryan, David Bassick, Richard Ayers, Lonnie Hands-On, Lecker LeCool, the Ministry of Peculiarities, and Jan Budman. Thank you all. We're always on the lookout for community partners who are up for working out special deals for our backers or who want to support the show in other ways. Hit me up at noah@noproscenium.com for details. And with that, sit back, settle in for a long drive, a big walk, or grab a bottle of something, because we're at this for about the next 2 hours, and it's our first 5-star runtime in a really long time, and I'll be back on the other side with some more special fun and some more things.
Hi there, NoPro listeners. This is Mikhael Tara Garver, your acting captain for this segment. I'm here because I was the director of immersive experience who created the Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser. Wow, I do know the name. And while I'm not serving as that role anymore, I am the head of the newly launching Culture House Immersive Experience Division, where we will create narrative, live, immersive experiences out in the world. But today I thought it would be interesting to turn the tables on your usual host, Noah. In fact, I asked him and his shipmates if they would chat with me about their experiences aboard the Halcyon. And we've got a lot of voices with us today, and they will introduce themselves. Kathryn, do you want to start?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. This is Kathryn Yu. I am one of the co-founders of the Immersive Experience Institute alongside Noah Nelson and Eric Vossmeyer, as well as the emeritus executive editor of No Proscenium. And while on board the Halcyon, my character's name was Colleen Finnell, a holodrama producer.
Awesome. Nick?
Hi, I'm Nick Fortungo. I'm the director of the Gaming Pathways program of game development at City College of New York, and I'm a scholar of games and interactive narrative. In my time on the Halcyon, I played Sindak Pak, Slicer for Hire from Coruscant.
Awesome. Graham?
Hi, everyone. I'm Graham Wetterhahn, the artistic director of After Hours Theater Company in Los Angeles. And in a galaxy far, far away, I played Garm Fallback, a Coruscant nightclub impresario.
Jessica?
Hello, my name is Jessica Creane. I'm the creator of I Can't Go On Plays. We make things like Chaos Theory, Know They Sell, Fair Trade, and all the serious stuff made playful. And on this cruise, I played Nerb Fabwoshi, who was technically a production intern from Chandrilla, and her parents had a stake in the Starcruiser. She was optimistic to the point of pure naivete.
And that leaves me, Noah Nelson, whose better self is Cirque Tython, Antiquities Acquisitions and Logistics, who was roped into this to be Garm's fixer on Batu at the galaxy's edge.
And Noah, although people know you, and that was an introduction of your character, can you just say who you are, who Noah Nelson is?
Sure.
Maybe defined by your fandom, I might say.
Okay, defined by my fandom, sure. Well, people know. If you skip forward, I'm the usual host of this show. Maybe you just jump to the good stuff. You might have. Founder of NoPro, yada yada. I've been deep into Star Wars since I was 5 years old. It entered into my life on the darkest day of my childhood and became the found family I needed and carried me forward through that. And I have written extensively about my Star Wars fandom and about Star Wars in places that aren't NoPro. So there you go. I'll link to that in the show notes. How about that?
And I'm going to start this with asking what everybody else is. So I'm asking you right now so we're going to go from, sometimes I'll be like, define, are you talking from your character who was in the galaxy, or are you right here? Talk to me about, just quickly, briefly, your relationship to Star Wars prior to going. Because I'll say this. I was not a Star Wars person prior to getting hired to do this job. I was an immersive person. So I learned Star Wars by way of making this project. So I'm interested to hear your guys' relationship to it. Kathryn, you were nodding your head.
Yes. My brother came home from his friend's house and he forced my parents to take him to the video store. And we got the golden anniversary VHS of Empire Strikes Back. And we watched those tapes so much, over and over and over. And then he got into gaming, and this was PC gaming. So we were playing the LucasArts Star Wars games over and over and over, to the point when we were watching television recently, one of the many Star Wars Disney Plus series, and I said to my husband, just the words just flew out of my mouth. Oh my God, that's an A-wing! Because I recognized the shape of a ship that was in a background of a scene. So, pretty deep, not as deep as Noah, but it has been in the background of like my entire childhood.
I mean, who is as deep as Noah? And I mean, I couldn't. Yes, I was afraid. Who else? Graham, what about you?
Sure. I grew up in I was born in the 90s, so my relationship to Star Wars was sort of between the two trilogies. So the prequel trilogy came out when I was still pretty young. I remember having like Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker and X-wing action figures growing up. I would probably describe myself though as overall a more casual Star Wars fan, which is I watch the movies and the TV shows and keep up with it, but it's one of many pieces of content universes that I follow. It's I definitely do not go as deep as either of the other two, which I think we had a range of us, and I think that's going to be good for talking about it.
100%. I think that's important. I think there's a really interesting thing for those who are not deep in the Star Wars lore of what you get deep into, right? Nick, how about you?
My earliest actual memory is standing in line to see the original Star Wars with my cousins and my father. So I go back to the beginning, but I have what Drew Davidson, who is a professor at Carnegie Mellon, calls an ACA fandom relationship to Star Wars, which means a highly critical relationship, to the point where I actually wrote an article for a dopey little blog I made called the Midichlorian Ruination Scale, about how the introduction of midichlorians was a gigantic mistake in the narrative universe, which led to the fun moment of having coffee with Carrie Beck and her calling me out on writing that article after she had gotten deeply involved in Star Wars. So I've had a hot cold relationship to Star Wars as a critic for a while, but still like very early memories of it, and still have all the toys in my office.
Can you mention who's the person you were saying, and who is the person you were having a conversation with?
Carrie Beck, who is an EP on a lot of the different content on the site. This was just, she used to be at the Sundance Institute, which I did a lot of work with, and then she moved over to Star Wars properties. And shortly after that, I wrote this article I thought no one saw, and then having coffee with her, she just like threw it in my face, which was awesome.
You and I will have to have a conversation about midichlorians and theosophy at some point.
And Jessica, how about you?
I think I probably consider myself at this point to be like a lapsed hardcore fan. I definitely have some of my early formative memories also watching Star Wars. The first game I actually ever made was a Star Wars board game. My best friend sent it to me recently. It's like I could barely write words with a pencil, but it is there. We used to like make droids out of styrofoam and green glue, and we used to like make our parents sit through our droid presentations, and we watched videos nonstop. We must have danced to that Cantina song hundreds and hundreds of times. I read all the novels. My mom made me a Leia costume once for Halloween because I wanted to be Cloud City Leia, not Blaster and Death Star Leia, because it was clearly the best outfit. And then, like Kathryn, I sort of hit a point where I could just recognize those movies from anywhere. I remember I was in an airplane looking into an airport, and it was just a pure white screen that I caught as we were taxiing. And I was like, oh, it's Hoth. And then the plane kept going, and so we kept catching other screens, and like sure enough, it was Hoth. So even from a blank screen, I knew the difference. But I've sort of kept up with the fandom, but in a way that I think I'm like a little bit of like a crotchety ant on a porch at this point, where I'm like, this isn't as good as the originals. Why did they do that? This is just a worse version of the originals. And so I probably need to just get off my porch, go inside, and just, I don't know, shut up about it, probably.
Make some hot tea.
Okay, so to start out, right, I was asking each of you, but I just want to open this up, please, just a conversation. Also, because there's so many voices, we're going to try to say your names. I wonder if, as you guys could tell me, did you connect before you went on your trip on the Halcyon? Did you have a conversation
Yes.
before you went?
Yes.
So tell me, we're gonna go on a journey. I'm gonna get like I would love to hear, before you'd gone, you have a conversation. What was it?
Yeah. Well, what was sort of fun is like what you just did, we didn't do, right? Like part of it was because we had from the moment we found out to arriving in line for Kathryn and Graham and myself was 10 days. So we hit the ground running. And Jessica, what was your turnaround? Was like 5, 7?
I think so.
Yeah, like incredibly fast turnaround because of the state of play at the moment. But we had this Zoom call that, how long did that Zoom call?
I think intros took us an hour.
Yeah.
Because we just started talking about stuff,
Mhm.
all the things we were excited about. And then how long is our backstory document? Like 8 pages?
I believe the Toe Dog Gambit is somewhere between like 6 and 8 pages.
Great. So what's the Toe Dog Gambit? Let's start there. Just give let me just get like a context. Toe Dog Gambit. Go. Someone tell me.
So there was a question as to whether or not it made sense for all of us to have characters who were traveling together for a reason, as opposed to disparate characters who maybe weren't connected. And Noah had already developed his character, Sir, a long time ago. I didn't really have anything, and Graham was also trying to figure something else out. We were looking at archetypes, stereotypes, who are the roles that keep recurring. And in speaking to Anthony Robinson, sometime NoPro correspondent and very good friends with Noah, he suggested I be a holodrama producer. So I started thinking like, okay, if I'm in the Star Wars version of Hollywood, what is that like? What do I do? What's my studio like? What are some of the shows? And then I was thinking, well, why would I know someone like Noah's character? Then I got to thinking about Anthony Bourdain, No Reservations, and the types of travel shows where he often had a fixture on the ground because he's going places that are not exactly tourist friendly, but needed that inside connection, someone that could go, cross boundaries and between worlds and maybe had a little bit of like an underworld connection. And then I was like, okay, what if we are working on a traveling documentary show very similar to No Reservations? Where does everyone else fit in? And originally I was pitching Graham, like maybe Graham should be like the actual chef bad boy type. And I don't know if you're actually into that, Graham.
Oh, I was into it, but I think I'd already I liked the idea of being a I like the Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca kind of character, like this sort of, I wanted to be a little bit more like neutral. I went in sort of not wanting to take sides in the First Order versus the Resistance conversation, and so that felt like a good way to do it. Is that I was sort of an owner of a series of nightclubs and cabaret spaces, and then it turned out that instead of being the chef, maybe the chef worked for me, and that's sort of how we found that connection.
And Kathryn, say again, your name on the ship was
Creane.
Colleen, and so you're a holodrama producer. And Graham, your name was
it was a very strong reach. It was Garm.
Helpful.
Full
So
name,
Garm.
please. Full name, Garm.
Get the full name.
Noah dubbed me Garm Fallback, which I like.
Because this is a fallback plan. Like the whole idea. Well, I'll let. So once it was determined that we wanted the chef to not be there, to like be external to us, then we sort of came up with we actually came up with like basically a budget related reason, and so I created the chef's character, who's Todog Kester, who is a basilisk. A basilisk is the type of alien that Dex Diner is in Attack of the Clones. He's the big four-armed guy who's actually running around in the High Republic novels these days, or the comic books these days. And they're actually pretty long-lived. And so I
have 4 arms. Come on.
Yeah, and they have 4 arms, and they're really really big. So like, you're not going to see a basilisk on the Starcruiser, and so this could become like a running gag for us as a group, that there's this other member of our party who isn't there, who sort of becomes someone that we can talk about or have side conversations of, something that we can kind of always keep up as we're going.
So just to say this back, so Todog Kester.
Yep.
Kester. Sorry, I need
Todog Kester. Yeah.
Todog Kester was not there.
Right.
It's going to catch up at any moment. Going to rendezvous at the next stop. Really, for sure.
He and Gaia should chat. So he was going to catch up. But let me just ask, why were you all on the cruise? Like, why did you get to go on a luxury cruise without your star?
So I'll set up the why, and then we'll let the others take over, like about the cruise liner, because then this starts to connect in. So the original plan for the pilot for Tasting the Galaxy with Todog, or what was that one of the titles? Or
that was the working title. We haven't.
The working title.
We need to
say
focus
it again.
group it.
That was fast. What was it?
Tasting the Galaxy with Todog.
Into it. Got it.
Right.
But we need to focus group it first.
Right. It's going to take a little time to get the right title. But the original plan, much like Bourdain, the idea was like meeting different chefs and different folks in their original, kind of habitat, or where they are. And the gag became that the original pilot was going to be on Takodana at Maz Kanata's castle, because Cookie Stuggs, the cook there, is galactically renowned, has their own cookbook, and this would be a great first thing. But of course, the First Order blew up Maz Kanata's castle, and Cookie is canonically sitting on top of Docking Bay 7 on Galaxy's Edge on Batuu. So that character from Maz Kanata's castle is on Batuu. So the production has to scramble to go from Takodana to Batuu instead, which opens up the opportunity because the 275th anniversary run of the Halcyon is happening, and why not get both high society dining and Cookie Stuggs working out of the Docking Bay dining all in one pilot episode.
And I'm going to take a pivot here, because what that brings up is the dining in on the Halcyon, right? Like there is a second night called Taste of the Galaxy. So you were incredibly prescient to think about that. Nick and Jessica, I'm wondering, you know, how for your characters upon going on a ship where you are normally documenting galactic food, how was the food experience? How was the cuisine experience?
Oh,
I'll kick
Jessica
this
should take the
off.
lead on
Yes,
this.
Yes, no, I'm paying attention. Yes, Jessica.
Yeah, it was both personally and in character a perfect experience for me. On a personal level, I'm a vegan with a soy allergy, and so I'm everybody's nightmare, most of all my own. And so it's just impossible to eat food. And so if I'm going somewhere, like I've had soccer mom vibes for years. I've just been walking around with granola bars in my bag to make sure I don't pass out at all times. And here, I the rule of thumb was go talk to a chef and they will make you things. And so there were just these incredible meals that our beautiful waitress or waiter Katie was telling us about. The chefs had just made things from scratch, and they were just playing around with new things in order to meet this challenge. And so the level of kindness and creativity that went into to feeding me in a way that was actually so joyful and really enhanced my personal experience was just honestly really moving. It just doesn't happen like that very often. Usually it's like enjoy your side salad. And the amount of food that they brought out was outrageous. The first night we sat down, and the same amount of food that came out for all four of my companions also came out for me, an equal amount of food. And so there was just this absolute bevy of tasty things. And in character, my character Nerib is comes from a very wealthy family, and so she is used to getting whatever she wants. And so to be able to go up to a chef and just say, "These are some things I want," or "What can I do with this?" was actually quite natural for her. And so it was one of two moments, the other being the Sabak tournament, which we can talk about, where this character and the circumstances, I think, aligned most fortuitously and most unexpectedly to allow her to be sort of like peak Nerb in those moments.
And we were
Nick.
also saying that because Nerv's family was an investor in both
Oh yeah.
my studio and the cruise line, this cabin magically opens up and we have to all go together. And of course, Nerv is my intern who has no business being part of the Hollow Pictures, but, has to come along for the ride anyway.
Excuse me, I'm very good at my job and I'm getting better every day.
So Nick, what was you can come at this anyway. What was your Toto's Gambit? Am I saying it right? I feel like I'm going to say it wrong. Yep, Todog's Gambit.
There's a
Or
phonetic.
Toto,
Yeah.
like the thing about Star Wars is like there's no canonical pronunciation for anyone's
Oh,
name.
I've learned that.
And
I've learned that very well.
And we leaned into that hard. Like that was a rule, almost to the point of like we need to be. What did Nerb? What was Nerb's various pronunciations for Cirque? What was like? What was one of them?
Cirque, Cirque.
Oh,
Yes,
Cirque was a good one.
Cirque being my personal favorite.
Please
So
don't
Nick,
call him that.
Yeah.
Nick, you were Sindek, is that correct?
Yes, yeah. So I basically formed my character once everything else. I actually had to drop out of the call at a certain point, the original Zoom call when they were working on all of this, and when I came back, I just was like, okay, what's the gap in the party essentially, and to use like just straight D&D terms, and I was like, oh, if we're scrambling to do this, you probably need a tech. I'll make a tech, and then I spun a tech out. But I'm an old school role player, so I went 5 times deeper into the backstory than I probably had to, and then sort of landed there, and then it gave me kind of a vehicle to kind of have a, like, at the beginning of the story, before I made this a pretty significant pivot on the first day, be a sort of like nuts and bolts. How are we going to get this done? When is Todog going to get here? You said Todog was going to get here before. Like, can we, do we know when Todog's going to be here? And then it actually made the meals really interesting, because we could have an in-character and out-of-character conversation that was essentially the same about critiquing the food, right? Because as guests of the Starcruiser, as real people, we were talking about the food experience. But then as potentially people shooting the food, we were talking about the food experience, because we were talking about what would look at it on camera and what would Todog like and what could we feature. So it became, that vehicle of Todog became like a useful way to keep us in character, even when we wanted to talk about like the experience we were having on the Star Cruiser.
So that's my next question, which is like, and then we're going to get into the experience of how, first of all, has everyone here, like, if you had gone on your own, would you have played a role? Like, if it hadn't been with this group, is that because would you have role played? Because Nick, you just said that's a thing you do, right? Like that's a right. Graham, you're nodding ahead.
So yeah, this is my first time kind of LARPing in any meaningful capacity. I've played like light house staff characters in shows before for my own work, mostly just as like a box office person. But I've never LARPed, certainly not for 48 hours or however long we were on the ship for. So I think definitely being with this specific group of people brought that experience out, which was really fun. And so yeah, I was definitely the least experienced role player of the group. I think the Todog Gambit and having such a rich backstory was really useful because some of us in the cabin hadn't met really before. Like Nick and I didn't really know each other before this trip, but one of the first things I remember doing on the ship is we were in the sublight lounge, and we were in character talking about what was the viability of the space for shooting and what would we need to do to update to the decor in order to make Todog happy. And it was just a really beautiful way to kind of get to know each other and get into the world. And yeah,
That's great. And like I will say too, right, this is not designed, the experience itself, right? Like I'm sure you saw people who were fully participating as character and people who are purely the same identifying version of themselves on Earth as they identify in space. And so I always talk about it as identity, right? You are claiming your identity and how you want to be in this world. And so I'm interested. I'm sorry, my question is like, and then go ahead, Noah. Like, I'm interested if you were switching between while you were on the ship all the time.
Yeah. I mean, and that's something, we were up till I think 2 or 3 in the morning on the final night, having like a big analysis bowl session, some of which we'll probably get into here. And by the time people listening to this, like some of it's already in written form on NoPro. There's a huge op-ed that I wrote, and someone in this group helped polish some things. And I always knew that I was going to take Cirque Typhon, because Cirque I created on the day that I first went to Galaxy's Edge. Chris Wessels, who's a friend of the show, dragged me along to get to go check it out, and I got to do the lightsaber build, and I had the nerve-wracking experience of doing the lightsaber build in front of Scott Trowbridge, who just happened to wander in that time. I was like, oh great, Scott's watching me.
Who's Scott Trowbridge?
Scott Trowbridge being the portfolio lead of all of Star Wars for Imagineering. He was just hanging around.
And I'll say this on the record, one of the best humans and leaders you can find out there, as somebody who got to work for him.
Oh yeah, no, I adore Scott as a person. All the interactions we've had, actually for about a year there, I was always embarrassed because I kept on being places maybe someone had dragged me to that maybe I wasn't supposed to be, and I was like, oh, man, what does Scott think of me at this point? But we're totally cool. I know he's cool with me, so like I'm happy about that. But like Cirque I'd come up with that name, and I had a different name, but like on that day they gave us little wristbands that were like, this is the group you go in, as you called in. And the wristband I was given was Typhon, which is a planet from Star Wars that originally showed up in the John Ostrander comics back in the early aughts, late 90s. There's the one of the original worlds of the Jedi. It also appears in the Mandalorian. It's where Baby Yoda sits on the little thing. And so because I had this wristband that said Typhon on it, I was like, well, I guess this character's last name is now Typhon. And so I've always been letting I built Cirque for Galaxy's Edge, and I knew that I had to take Cirque to the Halcyon if I ever got a chance to go. And he's also buddies with Anthony's character, Roan Favier. And he's a light alibi. And when we're there, we're always referring to each other by the character name and kind of slipping into character, slipping out of character. There's this a comfort zone. It's like, you got nothing better to do, go do some character BS, right? Or if you're presented by something that's in the world, meet the in-world with your in-world. But you don't have to necessarily hard LARP. And the thing that I was impressed by to go into analysis mode was that on the ship, the performers would meet you where you were. Wherever you were, they would meet you there. But more importantly, would leave the door open for you to go deeper. And that right there, not push you, not shove you to go deeper, but invite you to go deeper. And for me, from the very beginning, the thing that leads to NoPro existing is that invitation, going to an immersive theater piece and being invited to a scene, even though you don't really have a choice. You paid a ticket, of course you're going to go. But that invitation to go deeper was happening all weekend long, and you could shift which level you were existing in at any given moment. And
I will
that pattern.
I will openly admit that I'm going to try really hard when all this part is happening not to cry. So that's
Aw.
not a good. Oh,
It's
so
okay.
much.
We cried on the ship. You cry. You can cry here.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Oh.
cry a lot on that ship, but
Yeah.
but more so, I think that's yes. Before I go down that road, I want to take a step back and talk about so you've prepped,
Mhm.
you've talked on a Zoom, you arrive, and I've heard about a gentleman named Eli. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Oh, are you going to ask about the lost data pad?
I'm not going to ask about a lost data pad.
Which
You guys
happened to
talk
Maybe
be
you
about
should
a
ask about our
lost.
last data pad.
Yeah.
Someone kept losing their data pad.
Okay, so data
No,
pad.
we don't have to shame the person who kept losing their data pad. We could
Yeah.
just allow that.
You don't remember
Yeah.
the spell, guys. What are you
And let me
talking about?
clarify that
You drop it.
the data pad is what on the Halcyon you would call something that I normally would call my cell phone is a data pad. But so let's before we go to that, because like I'm just thinking of like you arrive in Orlando, Florida. You pull up. I imagine pretty certain you were some of the first to board. Yes, I've heard reports.
That is correct. Yes.
No, I'm well aware. And what was the first? What was the first few? What was the first hour like? What happened? What was it like? Not a great question, but
I mean,
yeah.
I think, and I'm gonna let because I just did a big bit of talking. But the thing that I keep telling everybody is that we sort of were on the way there. We were all blessed by the travel gods. On the way back, very different story for some of us in a deep way. To the point where the car, Jessica and Nick were coming from the airport. Graham, Kathryn, and myself were coming from the DoubleTree because we had gotten the night before. Graham had gotten 2 nights before. Kathryn and I arrived the night before. Jessica and Nick's car was the one to arrive immediately after ours. As Eli was checking us in, we were like, well, we're not all together yet. Our people, oh, there they are. Right? Like we were having that experience. The force was with us, to use the parlance. And that kind of that was sort of setting the initial tone. But I'll leave the others to talk about the line. And
Oh, yeah.
Eli.
We were very well taken care of. We are the annoying people who are not a family and wish to have a different credit card associated with every Magic Band. And they immediately started bringing us cold water bottles and cold towels and frozen grapes. And then everyone has, that moment where you go take a self-portrait in front of the sign because everyone wants that picture in front of the sign. So I think we did like 3 different devices and several different poses, and they were very, very accommodating. Like everyone there is just so welcoming and takes such good care of you. And I personally was like, okay, I think I can deal with, it's Orlando, it's muggy, there's a lot of heat, but there's also that energy because people kept coming, getting out of cars, getting out of lifts, and you'd be like, oh, that person's dressed up, this person's oh my god, look at that face makeup, look at that outfit, like, wow, this person's cosplay game is like, right on point. And you get a sense that not only have you come to play, but other people have come to play. And it just the magic like starts immediately. And it's, I don't know, I feel like it's kind of hard to describe. Like on paper, it doesn't sound that interesting, but the energy of the crowd as it starts to grow, it was something that I personally felt was like really intense.
What I hear you describing, or the way I would talk about it, the thing I talk about is like you see everybody being ready to be present, to be there. Like they are there right then. They might be anticipating things, they might be, but everything about it, right, is like that moment. What those guests do when you, or what the guest services do when you first arrive. They're like there with you in that moment, whatever's going on, whatever's happening, and we are all right here. Um, Nick, tell me, just because I'm going to start picking some of people. Tell me, like that first hour. So you've you've journeyed. Your cars have arrived at the same time. Tell me about the first hour, and anybody else jump in. But
Yeah, so we made some, because we're all like deep immersive people. We made some like rules about how we were going to be in character and out of character, right? That we were not going to be in character in the room. We were going to be in character outside of the room. And we kind of made a decision that we weren't really going to go into character until we had gotten into the Starcruiser itself, right? We were going to like wait until that moment to kind of kick it off. And so when we're outside, it's sort of like, we're joking around and taking pictures and building excitement. And then we go inside. And I think it's this, I hadn't thought of this actually until you just asked me this, but like, I was thinking really hard about, well, why did I feel comfortable like role playing in this environment? And a lot of times, when I do a lot of these LARPs, and I've done LARPs for a long time, and I've done multiple day LARPs, and the amount you're in character in a multiple day LARP is really essentially dependent on the environment you're in, right? If people are in character, then you go in character. If people are out of character, you drop out of character, right? You're responding. And what was remarkable about the first hour of the experience is that the set is so rich and consistent from the moment you get into the hallway that it never drops. And I think a lot in these kind of immersive performances about the idea of something modeling behavior for you. Like there's got to be things in the space that are telling you how to behave. And I've never had a set do that as powerfully and as, in a way, quietly, because it wasn't just that it was Star Wars, it was that it was seamlessly Star Wars, right? That the transportation to the Starcruiser was done like a shuttle and had shuttle sounds and shuttle looks. And then when we're there, there's nothing that doesn't look like it belongs on a Starcruiser. So I just felt like it was just very simple for me to keep role playing the whole time, even though I saw people in t-shirts, and even though I was interacting with people who weren't. Like, just the set itself was just so easy to go back to as like, oh, I'm in this place. And the idea, you mentioned the idea of presence, and I think I rarely felt so naturally present in an experience as I did there. And I think it was because there was no viewpoint I had where I wasn't looking at the thing I thought I should be looking at, right? In terms of like, I was always looking through my character Syndec's eyes, because the set was always reinforcing Syndec's reality.
well, and the fiction of that set, right, allows for the person in the t-shirt. It doesn't say that they're breaking anything. So I think, Jessica, what about you that first hour, or again, like other things, or what are other things you guys noticed?
Yeah, seconded to all of that. I think probably the moment where I started to sink in was Eli was so effortless about talking about where he was from. And so it was just the same. I don't remember exactly what planet it was, but it was the same
Eli from
degree
Lothal.
of
Yeah.
where was it?
Eli's from Lothal.
Oh, yeah. And it was like that. It was just like, oh yeah, it's my hometown.
Yeah.
It's the same way that I would say like, oh yeah, I'm from Philadelphia. Or if somebody else was from Philly, it would be, oh cool, I'm from Philly too. It just was so underplayed in some ways, but that made it perfect. It set the tone for me to feel like this is going to be in some ways a really naturalistic experience, that the human interactions would be very naturalistic, even though the experience itself is so outside of my Jessica's norm. And that was a really powerful moment for me. And everything else about the experience reinforced that reality, that this was a reality, that no one was playing at anything. And so even though intellectually I knew that was happening, I never felt it. And that is so rare. That is so rare in these experiences. And so I, sort of like what Nick was saying, I just kind of felt at home immediately. This is a place where I can play. This is a place where play is going to be supported. And it is up to me to not only to bring my own play, but to be present with those who are playing, because everybody's going to pass the ball back. And so that was something that I trusted immediately, and then that trust was never broken. And so it only got strengthened over the course of the time that we were there. So yeah, I think in terms of the first hour held me. It held my hand in a way that I felt connected and with the piece rather than led by the piece.
I also just wanted to jump in and say, yes to everything everybody's saying. There was also, in my work, we usually focus on, people are coming from all over. They've been sitting in traffic. In this case, they've been on planes, and their headspace is, probably excited, but kind of all over the place. I think what Starcruiser did so well is there was like 3 or 4 liminal spaces that brought you deeper and deeper into the world with each space that you ended up in. So you had the curbside where we kind of waited to get checked in, which had some of these hotel, the Starcruiser staff talking to you. Oh, Eli's from Lothal. That's kind of unusual. Then we got brought into a room that was kind of like all like gray stone, if I remember correctly. And there was like a boarding video, like a safety video. And then that was a little bit deeper. Then we got brought into the transport, which got you even more, a little even deeper. And so by the time you get onto the atrium, the main part of the ship, you forget that you were just outside in Orlando humidity and you are in, because you guys take the process takes probably an hour to onboard you from the curbside onto the ship, which is perfect.
Yeah, there's time to acclimate. Like I was just talking with Anthony about his experience on Survivor and some like the show. He was on like the 3rd season, right? And he talked about how they had acclimation time, which like I didn't realize that was part of the process. Of course they do, because they can't just drop them there. They'll all die of heat stroke because they're not used to how hot it is in like Fiji or wherever they are. And this was that. And also like we were sort of kind of being like narrowed down, like the spaces, the space where you get the orientation video is large enough people can mill about, but immediately after curbside, it's like a narrow little slate gray stone hallway, feels like a bunker, and then you get into a slightly bigger space, but then the transport's even smaller, and so this like you're squeezing down, and then the opening up into the atrium. Right.
It's
And
the
some of
Willy
these are,
Wonka moment, right? I
yeah,
always
and
call
some
it
of these
the
are
Willy Wonka.
classic Imagineering moves, right? Like we're going to shrink it down and open it up, right? Like this stuff, but they're classic moves because they work. And to Jessica's point about like it felt natural, it felt very human. Like they brought out cold towels and frozen grapes, and it was like frozen grapes. How genius, right? It was so simple. I'd never had a frozen grape. Like, like it was something I haven't had. And I was just like, wow, this is wonderful. Like just sort of like easing you into the idea that you're going to be taken care of, which is something that, you know, you may not necessarily have had. I mean, some people have done cruises before, so like, oh yeah, whatever, like like every whim is catered to, but like I'm not one of those people. So like I don't know what that process is like. And just this sense that there was like a benevolent force uh they're making sure that you're gonna have a good time
I
was
also
really
think there's something you're speaking to, which I would point out, which is like, yes, the Chandrila cruise line is a luxury cruise line, but
Mhm.
which is the Halcyon. But I think all the things you're describing are not about how fancy it is or the luxury
Mhm.
of it. It's the thoughtfulness and the care,
Mhm.
which all of you as immersive makers know, and as immersive people, right? Like that the care, that like passing from hand to hand, the space doing that is what was making that sounds like was making that experience happen. And frozen grapes being like another piece of that care, right? It wasn't like frozen grapes on a cold day; it was frozen grapes on a Orlando hot day, right?
And
Yeah, Kathryn.
And just to go back to what Noah was saying, that irising in and out and the lens opening up to that magnificent atrium with the 2 giant holotubes and windows out into space and a space map on the balcony above you, and you just walk around going like, "Oh right, I'm in space." Like there's no part of your brain that thinks I'm not in space. And I think the other 4 of y'all were like running around and doing stuff, and I remember hanging out in the atrium and SK620 just waltzes in
That's
And
the droid, the astromech, everybody.
so looks very much like R2D2 from the original Star Wars trilogy. And then a performer in an alien costume walks in and immediately starts interacting with the other guests. And not only are you
Sorry,
in
you mean
this,
Connie,
yes,
not a,
Uani, the
yep,
backing musician,
yep.
part of Gaia's entourage. And I was like, oh, right. This hasn't kicked off yet. They're just talking to people in the audience. But this is Star Wars. Oh my God, it's Star Wars. There's a droid and there's an alien. And she's talking to this older gentleman in an aloha shirt. And he's saying, oh my goodness, it's so glad to see you again. And she responds back in an alien language. And he says, yeah, yeah, I know. I'm like, what conversation is this? They're acting like old friends. And it just felt like I'm witnessing a reunion. And then I'm also witnessing the families aboard the ship, the kids, all of the kids who are kind of shy about approaching the droid because they want to interact with the droid, and the droid having these responses, and it really feels alive the way that it's beeping and booping and spinning. And I just remember standing there being like, where am I? How did they do this?
So now we're on the ship, which was a great transition, Kathryn. Well done. Because I'm looking at time and going like we could talk about this for hours, and so I'm just gonna talk about day one for a second. So you're on the ship. I love, Kathryn, how you just described it, right? Like you sat in the atrium and had an experience. Like I always say, as we were building it, there is no one type of participation. Sitting and being in that space is participating, and you get to do that as much as you want to run. But I'm interested, who went running? Where did you run? What did you find? Where did you go? Did you go to the cabins first? Do your cabin first? Like just like a quick overview. Where I am in space now. Go.
I'll do the short run. We hit the cabin. I think all of us hit the cabin. First off, we just like partly because also to hold to our rule of like in character, out of character. So like one quick beat of like, okay, cool. And where's everybody going? Great. See ya. I jetted off to the Crown of Corellia dining room and got just because it was lunchtime and I wanted to get a snack. I think I was the very first person to arrive. I found a piece of flatbread that had like chicken tikka and paneer. I was over the moon because Indian food's my favorite. And the one thing I wish there was at Batu was Indian food. And so already the first thing I put in my mouth, I'm like, oh, I'm already 1000% happy. Grabbed some blue milk and made a beeline to the gift shop because I didn't have any Starcruiser cosplay. And so I had to go on a shopping trip first thing and ran into other people doing the exact same thing and was instantly getting my cruise on because like I had that cup and I just set it down somewhere and like just forgot about it. I'm like, oh, okay, here we are, right? And so I was starting to slip into Cirque a little bit, but also had some Noah needs, like like that I need to attend to, and got into that mode. And then actually I had to like jump back and forth. Had to go a couple of times to get the right size on something. And then once I was in, you know, it was time just to kind of like slide into and start exploring and just finding my way around. And it was just looking at all the little details and kind of figuring out what's up.
I'm trying to remember, but I think we all we're doing our own independent exploring from like around 1-ish to 4.
Yeah.
And then muster happened, and then that's when like the story really starts to kick off. And then immediately we start getting interactions. I think Garm, you were cozying up to Lieutenant Croy like real fast.
Well, I think that they had started. They had. I remember there was a point with the First Order. Was it the droid who told us about the? Was it the room droid that told us about the First Order? Yeah. So we had, and none of the actors had talked about that yet. But the room droid had mentioned this to us,
Right.
and the actors were, or sorry, not the actors. The crew was acting a little jumpy anytime we brought it up. They're like, "No, we don't know what you're talking about." But yeah, I think I was trying to make a point of keeping my options open very early on. One of the fun things about muster for me was I legitimately was thinking this was a safety muster, like on a cruise ship. I had forgotten that I wasn't, and I remember turning to them at one point and being like, "Oh wait, we're not actually in space or
There's
on a boat.
no life vests.
I don't know what you mean, Graham. It was real.
We were in space, Garm. We were in space.
But it was, I was so dropped in. It didn't even cross my mind that there wasn't like that this was there was show reasons for this as opposed to like general like weekend safety reasons for this.
This was sort of the fun part about being with Graham was that because he hadn't LARPed before, like and wasn't as like dyed in the wool on Star Wars. There was a few times we basically pulled the wool over Graham's eyes just as we were playing, and just moments, and I actually even have on video of Graham being like, "Oh, wait, is this? Are you just making this up, or is this real?" And the answer is like, yes. And it made it so much fun because it kind of, in some ways, Graham was sort of like our built-in audience. And so much of this started with like Graham on the day that things started to happen long before was like, I want to go and I want to take you. And I'm like, if we can find a way, sure. So like I had, I got to be Graham's entertainment a few times, and I was thankful for being able to do that.
Oh, Graham was definitely my entertainment multiple times. Dropping Lieutenant Croy's name during some of the rides, thinking it would get him somewhere.
Oh, yeah. And the people on the rides like giving him crap for it, right?
Yeah.
So like
if Lieutenant Croy was anything important, he would have a Star Cruiser instead of being on that cruise.
Yeah. Like there was some saltiness from the Batuu bound.
So the context, you go on an excursion to Batuu, then on your second day, and you're on Rise of the Resistance, let's say.
Yep, this is where it happened, yeah.
Right? Yeah. What were you going to do on Rise of the Resistance? Did you have a task you had to do I don't want you to let out any secrets, but right?
Yes. We had tasks that we had to accomplish, and I think we were still obvious. I mean, we were obviously in character at this moment, and so we're like, oh, we're on. I'm like, no, don't worry, guys. Like we know Croy. Like let's use that to our advantage, and maybe they'll go easier on us.
And somebody there said to, what did they say?
Oh, more than one
multiple
person.
Somebody.
Yeah. Basically that Croy was not like if Croy had any respect within the First Order, he wouldn't be on that cruise ship, and just sort of dismissed his name as anything that would be of value, which led us into this nice spiral of like, why did you think this would help us? We're like now trapped on a First Order ship going shipped away to interrogation,
But from like a Graham perspective, like, holy crap, you guys trained the ride staff in the world?
Yeah.
Like they didn't skip a beat. Nobody skipped a beat.
Yeah. Which is, as someone who's been on those rides in Anaheim more than once, although actually maybe not Rise, actually. Maybe Rise, maybe this one.
I've been on it 4 times.
Yeah. Like to see them recontextualized was really cool. Particularly this idea that like, you can keep on playing there. And in the rides, I think walking around on day 2, jumping ahead a little bit, when we were walking around about 2, I think we were falling more into like, okay, we're people, we're not our characters for a lot of it, unless we were on mission. We'd have little beats when we were on mission where we would like mission, talk with each other. But when we were in one of the rides or in Oga's, we like slipped back into like our Star Cruiser personas. And that was really cool. And then of course we also made a tactical choice to go outside to go check out Star Tours, which Garm gave a context for, that we were checking out the CSL competition. But walking outside of that part of the park, Zay Amsbury, years ago when we first took Zay Amsbury to Galaxy's Edge, and Zay knows Disneyland real well. Zay was our original New York coordinator. Walking out of Galaxy's Edge, Zay was like, I just got ontological vertigo, right? This like sense of like everything's like just like wrong being in the wrong part of Disneyland. And this is someone who loves Disney. Like I for all of the things, I was born and raised in that park essentially. And walking into Hollywood Studios, which I keep having to remember to not call MGM Studios.
And it wasn't far. Like we're talking, it's like one of the closest rides to
Yeah, it was the Muppet Vision
10 minutes tops.
yeah,
But
and
somehow we left the resistance camp and blah.
it just not even 10, like 2 minutes away, and you're just like, oh, this is wrong. And there's nothing wrong with that theme park. It's a great theme park. It's wonderful. It's lovely. But when you're in a different bubble, it's just like,
Yeah,
why
we were
just
deep
no.
in the Halcyon and the Halcyon world. Like, the reason you're on Batu is actually because you need these secret plans, or to make contact with this person, or to find out the location of this, and you need to come, like, do your thing and come back to the ship with the secret information that you've like procured from Oga's by saying the right thing to the bartender. Like, it all starts to make sense, and it's all got this cohesiveness. And then you break it by leaving, and you're like, I don't like this. I want to go back.
Yeah.
Where's my cold towel?
It's
Where's
like
my
the
cold towel?
opposite of the transition on that we were
Yeah.
just talking about, right?
But I want
It's
to
the opposite of im. It's like exmersion, unmersion.
unmersion.
Nick, what were you gonna say?
I really want to go back to this point though about the moment on the ride when they respond to us about Croy, because I think like there's this, you mentioned that there's this sort of spectrum of responses from like the and we talked a lot about this. This was what we were talking about until 3 a.m. was essentially like like how do you handle people at different levels of immersion and different levels of participation. And for me personally, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but for me personally as Nick, what was really fascinating was I expected there to be crew members who would hold the narrative line against people who were really floundering or were deliberately trying to violate it. And I expected them to kind of encourage people into the narrative. But what I did not expect in a million years, and was by a mile the most mind-blowing thing about this experience, was that if you threw a ball at them, they didn't like there's an aikido that people do in these performances to sort of like, I'm not going to remember what you said, there's 300 of you, whatever, I'm just going to like pass this by, right? That I'm used to in immersive performances. And instead what happened is they would retain it, they would absorb it into their narrative, they would like react to you in realistic ways, they would remember it hours later and
The
then
next day
weave it into content that they needed to do. I've never seen that before. I've only seen that in LARPs where I was participating with other participants who were doing that, right? Like, and even then that doesn't happen that often. The idea that someone who was like in the crew thinking about the plot, thinking about the experience of all of these people, still taking care of me, right? Just because, and I mean, literally there's a moment in, I don't want to jump ahead too much, but there's a moment in a one-on-one with Ray where I literally just improvised something while I was walking down a hallway, like just off the top of my head, that came up in the scene, the major scene later on as a reference point. And I'm like,
you can tell what happened. What happened?
Well, okay, so without going into the whole, I mean, it will back up into it at a certain point, but like in the middle of the journey on the first day, because of like the person I'm just going to praise as like the most incredible performer of the whole thing, which was SagaWaking, which was just everything that happened that SagaWaking did. The scene in the climate simulator where where she senses that there's something going on with the force, and then rocks magically move. Everything she did was just incredible, and she took very careful care of me in really an amazing way. I just can't speak highly enough of how that plot moved. But she ended up sort of giving me kind of like off data pad, meaning outside of a formal schedule, information about being in a place. And when I was there, when I went to the place that she told me to go to at this off minute thing, like at be here at 6:03, right, kind of moment, I ran into Ray, right? Like just hiding in a corridor. And like that, and I did a one-on-one, which was cool, and we were just talking, and I was in character the whole time. But as we were walking away, and more people are gathering, and we start moving into a plot where Ray is sneaking around the ship because there are things Ray has to do on the ship, and Ray can't get caught. I just offhandedly mentioned, because my character is becoming force sensitive, I just so you know, and it's basically with this delivery, Syndax says, just so you know, you're like radiating energy. And Ray's like, what do you mean? And I'm saying, I can just feel you behind me. There's this an energy coming off of you that's so strong. I've never felt anything like it. And she just records that, and then we just keep going, right? Like, that's it. We don't say anything else about it. And then later on, like, again, like this is like an hour and a half later at least, there's a big scene where a bunch of people are gathered in a room, and Ray is monologuing about something that Ray sees. And Ray just turns to me as I'm sitting in the audience and says, Syndak, you said something about energy rating off of me earlier. Can you explain that to everybody? And then I did, and she used that as an entree to talk about the Force, to then talk about the Jedi object that had been recovered. And that was masterful, right? Like that was clearly some place that she was going, but she had found something in the play that she could hold on to. And she didn't just hold on to it, she remembered it was me. She knew that I could deliver it, so she let me deliver it, which was cool because then I became one of 3 people interacting in the scene, and it got where the plot needed to go, right? It didn't derail the plot in any way. And that, like,
Well,
just
And
brava, right?
this isn't the only performer. Like the Ray performer's doing that. Saja Kier, is the source of the galactic wide lesson of never follow the Saja to a second location, and in a good funny way. And then the actor playing Wraith, right? Like or the actor playing Sandro. We'd have these moments with someone, and then they're treating their characters like they're real people, and that we are real people. Like we're all being present with each other in the moment and all playing the moment like it's real.
can I ask you a
As being
question?
silly. Yeah.
They were real people, right?
Yeah.
Right. These were real people.
Yeah.
I'm actually just saying this as a fact. Like, they are real people. They're real people standing there with you. What you mean is, like, they're interacting with you from themselves.
Right.
Like, or right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean that only to differentiate of, like, we've talked about droids and we've talked about
Oh yeah,
right?
these
Like,
are actors. These are actors who are physically there, who are not on a screen, although sometimes they are on screens because of the way it works, which is very subtle and clever, right? And they are the feat that they are doing that impresses all of us so much is that like an improv game, they are doing callbacks. They're pulling things back, and not just from like 5 minutes ago, but long form style from an hour ago. And it's not just one, right? It's who's playing Ray, it's who's playing Kier, it's who's playing Linka, it's who's playing Wraith, and it's going all along, and it gets you into these loops with them that create
Graham,
complexity. Yeah.
Graham, and then I feel like Jessica as well. Yeah, Graham, go for it.
Well, I'll one that I remember specifically, who I think the way the show is structured is there's a few sort of main quest tracks that you can fall onto, but there's a number of characters who aren't really related to that, and so this one character, Sandro, who's sort of a musician character and is sort of dressed as a passenger to the point where I was like, is this just a guy with a really good cosplay and a cool guitar? And then saw an earpiece but initially I thought he was a performer, and I was like, wait a second, is this just a random cruise guy? But we had moments from the first couple of hours on the ship that developed. We had an entire arc where we just met. I was a nightclub owner, he was a musician. It developed over a couple of days. Then he was playing shows at the club. Then we had a record deal. Then all of a sudden in the finale, some of this stuff gets brought up in the finale of the whole thing in front of the entire 250, 300 person audience. And we had an entire, none of this is scripted. None of this is on menu, right? This is he as a person just went on this journey with me specifically. And that was really, really, really special, particularly in that environment with that many people to have to keep track of.
And the greatest gonk rock concert, in the galaxy happened. So,
Jessica, talk to me about any moment that, like, I mean, I'll go back to, right, we have these terms in immersive where we use the words one-on-one, or we're now referring to other things of improv, all those things. I would say that there's maybe different language. I wouldn't even say it. Someday, when I talk about it more openly, and it's not about that, I think there's different language for this because it's actually some of the structures that we're used to being structures are not structures, and some of the things that we're not used to being structures are structures, right? But the thing that is the most true, you can ask any single one of them, they are truly having those experiences with you, and like 100%. And so I'm interested in the moments like that you guys are describing. Jessica, is there a moment for you where you're like, oh, I am here with this person that like stands out for you?
Yeah, that was actually exactly what I was thinking about as we've been talking, is these moments that there were moments that felt highly theatrical and highly personal in the ways that make immersive so special. But it was so excellent. It was so actually awesome in the way that it felt. I felt awe so many times in this piece, in that I felt special the whole time, but I felt special in a way that didn't make me feel FOMO in the way that a lot of immersive also does, or in a way that makes it feel hierarchical sometimes, or like I can feel sad if I'm not a part of something where it feels like I've done something wrong. Even though as someone who's deep in immersive, I know these things to be untrue, there is still something about going through an experience and knowing in some worlds you can pay more to be special. In some immersive worlds, you get chosen at random. It's luck. In others, there's a way to play the game, or you know people. But there are these worlds at play that we as participants at times don't know the exact details of what's happening, even if we know the world of immersive really well. And inside the Halcyon, I felt special. I felt cared for. I did not feel FOMO, and I did not feel like I was getting an experience that wasn't available and open to everybody who was there. And that felt really incredible. The openness to the experience and also the responsiveness. And so to literally ground that, there was a moment early on when all of us ended up out in a climate simulator. And just to really add context to this, we were all seeing this sign on the inside that says climate simulator, and it wasn't open yet when we got on board. And so we were curious, what is this? Is it projection mapping? What's it going to be? And then we opened the door and it's Florida. It's in world, but it's an open space.
It's a simulator of Batu. Right?
Yes, my apologies. It's a simulator of Batu.
Incredibly high tech.
Seems to be broken because it's only ever simulating Batu.
No, that's because we were at
You're
Batu.
going to Batu
Yeah.
the next day. It has to
you got to
simulate.
acclimate to Batu.
Acclimating it for Batu. It's not broken. It is simulating Batu. It is a very good simulation of Batu.
It's uncanny.
It was
Yes.
Yeah, it was laugh out loud funny for me. It was it was so delightful. And I mean, it was just like one of those really subtle, absolutely hilarious things about the piece. And that enough, like if that had just been the joke, great. But the part of the thing that makes the world so special for me and like it makes these moments so special was the build. There was a theatrical build with highly naturalistic interactions and interactions that were, again, super responsive to us and so emergent from the group that was present, from the four of us ending up in this climate sim with Sajakir, who is having this conversation with us about what the Force is, that really felt like it came from our own philosophical curiosities and assumptions in character about what the Force is. And so at one point she just invited us to, there's this big rock garden in this climate sim. And so she invited us to come sit on the edge of this rock garden, stick our feet in, and build little cairns on top of the larger rocks. And so we're sitting there having this conversation about focus, about intentionality, about good, about evil, about all of these things that I want to talk about all the time anyway. But we're doing it in world and character. We're doing something with our hands and having this kind of bonding moment for all of us. And then she just very smoothly transitioned into having us close our eyes and see if we can feel the space, feel the experience, feel our connection to each other, feel these things that we have been talking about in an embodied way, what had just been philosophical and heady a moment before. And as we have our eyes closed, suddenly I can hear the rocks falling. These little cairns that we had built up are tumbling down. And then we open our eyes and there's a rock moving across the surface of one of the larger rocks. And it was this moment of going from, oh, we are here, we are cared for. There is a metaphor at play. There's a world in which we get to play the Force as meditation, as focus. And then there's the fact that there is magic happening in this world too. And that, to me, that the build from the humor to the comfort to the personal to the metaphor to the magic, it just kept going. And things like that happened over the course of the entire experience. So there were these like bubble moments that were so beautiful. And we had been, I think, the initiators of that scene, or at least around in the very beginning of that scene. But others who were in the climate sim at the time were brought in as well if they wanted to be there. And so there was also just this openness that did not feel exclusive at all. And then we got to walk away with these artifacts. We got to take a stone with us. And that was a pivotal moment for my character, Nerb, and also just a moment where I, Jessica, was utterly in awe of the scale and the scope and the breadth and the care of the storytelling and the ways that the mechanics and the narrative and the training and the participants all came together. It was flawless. It was a really flawless scene.
Kathryn, you're about to say
Yeah.
something.
Well, you guys, it's been like an hour. Did we even talk about Wraith yet? Oh my god. How do we not
I
talk
touched on
about
Wraith.
Wraith?
So we're
Okay,
talking about
okay.
Wraith Cole.
Wraith Cole.
Wraith Cole.
So one of the things that always strikes me about the design of this experience is, slight spoiler, but whatever, like you do get glimpses of the iconic characters from the films, but the actors who you're primarily interacting with, of course, over the course of 2 days, they are not from the movies. They are not from the shows. They are original characters, which means you get to meet them for the first time. And this just leaves a lot of space because you don't know how the captain's story is supposed to go. You don't know how Lenka's story is supposed to go. So there's this openness and this generosity where, as you were saying, Michael, it is happening to all of you. The story is happening to everyone aboard the Halcyon in real time. They are real people and they're interacting with you and you are finding things out together. The first order is taking control of the ship. Oh, well, what's like Sandra's response going to be? How does Gaia feel about, like, all of that is in play. And one of the things that, people love about Star Wars is the underworld, right? The scoundrels, the thieves, the smugglers, and that all gets wrapped up in this extremely charming, very funny, kind of mysterious character where you don't quite know where Wraith's loyalties lie at first. And then if he lets you into his inner circle, you find out he is on the side of like justice and righting a terrible galactic wrong, something that was stolen from a people. And you, my co-conspirators on the Halcyon, like, we're gonna fix it. And just being let into that, feeling like, it's Ocean's 11, like, and you get to be part of the heist.
Yeah.
That to me was something that just felt like, of course, everything has been leading up to this moment. Like, of course, we're the ones to do it. And he's got a plan, and there's going to be a bagman and a swapperoo, and we're going to do like an Indiana Jones, put this here, and oh, let's create a bunch of distractions. And of course, the making of the distractions and Noah's ability to improvise with the timeshares of Dantooine.
Oh, that was a different heist. There are
I know.
heists.
There's multiple heists. So we could talk about the timeshares of Dantooine, but I also want to call out Nick improvising in front of the captain. The captain busts in at our secret meeting, and Noah says, we're making a new version of Sabak." And what did we
it's called
call
the
it?
Halcyon Shuffle.
Well, we were designing the heist, which we got to make up, and they were using Sabak cards to sort of indicate.
So let's go a step back. Let's go a
Yes.
step back for a second, just to give context. So day one, you meet Wraith Cole.
Even before we even meet him, day one, you start getting data pad messages from Wraith Cole. And we're like, who is this guy? And we were all talking like, who's it? Are you getting messages from Wraith guy? Who's this guy? I don't know who this guy is. Has any of us seen this guy? And that was really cool because we're wondering, here's this character we don't know about. He's got a picture, so I guess he's going to show up. But like, we don't know. We don't know why it's happening here. And so we start to be trickled into his storyline, and we're not too sure where his loyalties are.
He's sussing you out, right?
Exactly.
He's figuring out who he can trust.
He started reaching out to us after we were playing. We hacked into some part of the ship. So he reaches out after he tells that you already have some sort of slicing ability.
Totally. So he reaches out to you. You meet him. I'm gonna jump through this so we get to heistiness, because again, this is the beauty of it. I happen to know some things. So he meets you. He's also you meet him at the muster. Did you guys chat with him at the muster?
No.
Okay. But he steps up at the muster, right? He announces himself because he is what? He is what is he?
Gaia's manager.
He's Gaia's manager. And Gaia is a galactic superstar, right? I'm doing this fast, sorry. So jump in if whatever. Gaia is this you superstar. He's her manager, and he jumps up, and then do you see him again before you go to dinner and see Gaia's show?
We didn't really get to talk to Wraith until the end of evening one. I think it was actually a character we all kind of were curious about because we were getting messages. but we didn't actually, I think other people did, but we didn't actually get to talk to him until I think Gaia's concert.
Yeah.
Great. So you go to dinner, which is around, like, you've been there now. You had a muster at 4:00. You're at dinner around like 8:00, right?
Yeah.
So, yep. So, like, you
So we've been
are
playing for several hours, and
Yeah.
we're like, oh, finally, we get a chance to connect with him.
I also
Right.
like the rhetoricalness of that question. You went to dinner around like 8:00. I know because I know.
Things.
Sitting there
I know.
with the itinerary. We can get our itineraries out.
But
no, you don't need to.
we-
It's
we-
all
we were-
yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
were all, I mean, we were primed. We wanted to meet Wraith. I think all of us were curious as to who this guy was at this point, and we hadn't had an interaction with him. And we were hoping, like, maybe we'll get to see this guy at dinner and have an interaction with him at dinner. And we did. It's almost like a hazy blur, but like we go into patter with him, and the patter's good, right? You know, we just sort of like talk our way in.
He came and sat down with us.
Yeah, he
It
did.
was such a beautiful moment. We were just having dinner, and all of a sudden, this character we've been so curious about slides into the booth with us.
Was it
saying
because
that
we
he
were
wanted to meet
dancing
us.
like idiots? Is that what happened?
Or was that
I think it was
afterward?
before we were dancing
Was
like
before
idiots.
It was before Gaia, the Gaia show, right? You were just at dinner.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So before Gaia comes out and performs, he comes over and chats with you guys. What is he chatting with you about?
It's a little, I mean, the funny thing is, like, I felt to some degree a little starstruck at that point because we hadn't met this guy. And however winds up shaking out, we do get him tagging us into the stuff he's going. He's like, I'm looking for some folks to, like, you know, help out with some stuff I've got going on here. And we had already been doing datapad stuff with him. So we're like, oh yeah, no, we know.
Right. And we were all going Batu tomorrow, and he really needed someone to go to Batu on his behalf.
Right. And so there's that aspect of it. But then on top of it, much like Nick's deal with the Saja of like show up at this time, we get an off the books invitation. It's like, hey, come around at this specific time tomorrow.
403, no younglings allowed.
Right. And that was very appealing. The no younglings part was very appealing because I was like 2 pod racers in at that point. It's funny because that also like set some things into tension because like some of us had designs on like the Sabak tournament, and indeed Nerb winds up. I'll let Jessica tell what happens in the Sabak tournament. Nerb.
So I'm just gonna get us to
Yeah.
day one, right? So
Yeah.
Wraith, day one, you have this interaction with him. He chats at
Yeah.
Gaia's show. Sorry, because I want to get to the
Right.
Sabak tournament, which is day 2.
Yeah.
Any other interactions with Wraith day 1? What else happened?
Don't really think we have anything else that night that doesn't really serve on the memory.
There's so much that happens in
I know.
each hour. It just feels like, really? Was that really only an hour between this and that and the other thing? Like,
Well,
it's
I mean,
really intense.
There's a set piece of the is the theft is that night or is the theft the next day?
That's the next day. Yeah. That's almost like kicking and early on, right? Because like basically the minute the shuttle closes, like the last shuttle comes back and it's like, here we go, the story's starting.
Well, 403, you had to meet him, right?
Yeah. And 4
So
o'clock was the last shuttle back. From
Sure.
Batu.
So on 403, you have to meet Wraith on day 2, and you meet him, and so I want to go back for a second. So Wraith, prior to that, has he sent you a message to explain what he needs you to do?
Oh, yeah. The whole entire backstory, who the stone actually belongs to, what his plan is to swap it out for a ringer, and the fact that you have to go to Batu to get the ringer made.
I mean, he did that in person in the dining hall, right? So like we're basically we're invited to a heist. And going back years ago, one of the first questions I put to Sarah Thatcher, who's also one of the leads on the project, was, am I going to get to steal the ship? Or is there some kind of heist here? Like, I want to do a heist because there's something about like, you're in like the upper echelons in Star Wars. And whenever you're in the upper echelons in Star Wars, someone's got to be trying to boost something. Like there's just a need for that. And here was that. And it had like all these, like, there were good moral, ethical reasons for doing this heist, but it was also a heist, which is exceptionally fun. And that leads us to that moment at that 403 meeting where we're getting you got to plan the heist. And so here's the planning of the heist.
So you guys are in a small space, you're planning a heist, and the captain comes upon you. And
Our secret
Nick,
meeting, no.
at your well,
Yeah.
it could be problematic, right? Because to be fair, Wraith is doing this he's not doing it for the First Order, and he's not doing it for the Resistance. He's doing this is, like you said, scoundrels. So Captain comes upon it, that could be a problem, right? So Nick, what happens?
So there's a map that's being drawn on the floor, using Sabak cards that's sort of laying out the atrium so that he can start, like basically, like doing the X's and zero movement of the players about how the heist is going to go. And the captain walks in, and Noah says, "Oh, we're doing a new version of Sabak. It's called the Halcyon Shuffle, right?" And so the captain is like, "Okay, how do you play it?" And this is where, like, so I'm a game designer. That's what I do, right? So I look at the floor and I just make up Halcyon Shuffle on the spot. I'm like, oh yeah, there's like it's like Sabaki, so that you lay out a set of cards in the middle of the table and then you flip them over one at a time, and the players can draw from those cards rather than drawing from the cards that they get. But the cards are frozen like they're normally frozen in Sabak. But of course, you have a number of rounds to equal to.
And the look on Captain Keevan's face was just like, oh, I can't believe they're doing, like, there's a look of like, this actually sounds plausible, and it's just so fun.
Nick, do you remember the conversation we had going to breakfast?
I don't know. What was it?
We were walking down the hall because we were the first to get ready, and you were complaining to me that Sabak wasn't as interesting as it could be.
Oh yeah. I had already, it was spinning in the back of my head. I'm gonna make Halcyon Shuffle, by the way. I'm like already working on it. Just because, like, I think I know what I want it to do, and Noah has already offered his Sabak group as a testing group. So
yeah, I'd love to learn it, Nick. Once you make it,
well, and Nick, if you want to talk in depth on it, like there's things that maybe you don't know about, like more standard Sabak, like either mid rim or Cloud City Royal, that could influence it. That can kind of mix the beauty of both Coruscant Shift, which is what you play on the Starcruiser, with sort of the more traditional forms of Sabak that have interesting trump hands in it.
And now I feel like I'm at dinner with you guys. I feel it. I just felt it.
Well, I mean, someone pulled a move, and they were mixing up the rules between the Carillion Spike and the Halcyon. Like it.
Yeah, yep. But then of course Garm threw it all under the bus.
Oh yeah,
Garm. Was that the next? That was that interaction, wasn't it?
That was that interaction. Garm starts taking the captain to task for running an unsafe ship, and she throws a gas. It was so just like, it was more.
Or why at that moment was that the time to do it? You were adamant. What was unsafe? What was the
all we were. I mean, we were doing this heist for this character, and then the captain comes out and says, "Hey, you guys are putting us at risk. This is dangerous. How dare you guys do this?" And I was like, "Captain, you've been like, the First Order is here because you guys have been sloppy for the Resistance, and you've been putting us all in danger. We're here trying to scout for this holodrama. We're trying to do business with the cruise line, and here you are getting us, mixed up in this First Order stuff. You're every single stop you're doing, First Order Resistance stuff happens. That's so sloppy, and then she just.
How did she react? How did she react to that? Yeah. The captain is a powerhouse. Like, you don't. Wow.
It's okay.
Well, and I once again, this is my first LARP, so I wasn't sure.
No, you did everything right.
Yeah. So I was like, did I just push the actor too hard?
No, you did everything. Everything you guys. I just want to say this, like, Garm, everything you did is right. Like, you were being a human with that person, right? Like, and that person was then a human back to you, which is, I'll just note, one of the most complex parts of doing an experience like this at Disney, where you're also training that, like, sometimes people are wrong, and sometimes it's a no, and sometimes there are boundaries, and sometimes there are all of those things, right? So the captain being able to, like, articulate a boundary isn't bad. We as human beings should get better at having conflict and being able to communicate boundaries. So, like, in my world of how I think about that, that's amazing that happens, because then you learn, like, oh, if I do something, someone's going to tell me too far. But it wasn't too far for her as an actor. You were right. Yeah. Like, I mean, if you were abusive, that'd be different, but you weren't. No. You were in it, right? Like, I'm not saying. But so wait, I want to go back. You said that something happened, Nerb, for you in this moment. Is this true? Or did Noah, you brought up something that
No, because like so the thing about it is like we speed ran that too, right? I mean, look at us, right? Of course we fit everything. We were done with the rides within like 45 minutes, and then we hit up Oga's, and like Nick went to oh my god,
Savi's workshop.
Savi's.
Yeah.
I think I know.
But
It's,
like
it's
we're
because
doing
Savi's
missions, doing
We're doing
missions.
missions.
We were
doing
also in the
missions.
first transport. We were also there
Yeah.
very early.
The scanning was good, but like as it is, and we were back for lunch on the ship, which if anyone's going, and
So good.
it's the way to go. And we managed to like slide into the Sabak tournament, and this was.
So I'm going to
big
go
for
back
me.
for a second and
Yeah.
just break code of a little bit of things you said, which is that it's day 2. You're on the first. So we talked about day 1 a little bit. Maybe we'll go back, but you're on the first shuttle because there's a transport going down to Batu, right? And
you
that
have an
transport,
excursion.
you have an excursion just like a cruise. And that transport, as you take it, what is it? It's like it's a transport ship, correct?
Yeah,
Space bus.
Yeah.
It's a space bus, but it's a transport ship.
It's
And
also where they play jizz music, and Jessica asked us, "What is this?"
it's jizz music.
Yeah, jizz whaler.
One of like 6 times
saying, but yes.
It had been mentioned so many times in character and out of character. I had no idea what anybody was talking about, so I had to wait till a moment where I could actually ask that could be out of character, which I think wasn't the transport, but that was the one that triggered it for me. And then finally, when we were out of character, I was like, what is jizz music? Is it a metaphor? What is happening?
Well, because Cirque and Sandro had created a extremely real sounding jizz song improv.
Yes.
So so we're on the transport. You're going to Batu,
right?
Which is the
Galaxy's Edge. It's the theme,
but it's the outpost on the
Mhm.
cruise that you're going to, right? As an excursion from the cruise, you get down there, and you guys have been sent messages on your data pad that you had missions you needed to do. So I think what you were saying, Noah, just to reiterate, is like you guys get down there, first transport off the ship, you get through your missions, you go to Oga's Cantina. Nick, you do some savis, get yourself your own personal lightsaber, and you guys are back up by lunchtime, back on the Halcyon, have a delicious lunch, and then there is a Sabak tournament.
There's a Sabak tournament, which I'm making a beeline for, and Nerb and Garm also come through.
Noah brought a special outfit to wear.
I was in my cosplay, but I also I decided to make like a World Series of Poker joke, and like I got sunglasses and a ball cap so that like no one could read my expression. Having a blast.
Because you play Sabak. You've played Sabak before, correct?
I've played Sabak. Look, I've played many variants of Sabak before, and then also the Holo Table, which is upstairs in the Sublight Lounge, which we were playing around on. I think the night before, like we got a chance for 4 of us to actually play together, and the version of Sabak that's on the Halcyon is a different version from ones that have been established in the canon before. Sabak goes all the way back to the L. Neil Smith novels that were about Lando Calrissian, so they kind of suggested the shape of that thing back in the 80s, and it's legendarily, and you see in the movie Solo, Han Solo wins the Millennium Falcon in a Sabak game, and Sabak, for those from the outside, it's a little bit like poker, a little bit like blackjack. It's this fusion in there, in that there's target numbers and there's over and under, but in a lot of versions of Sabak, you can make these wacky hands. And in the one that's on the ship, it's a little more about hitting the numbers up or down. And we sort of learned that version. I hadn't played that version before myself, and the table, there's no instructions at the Holo Table. You just kind of figure out how the game works by playing it, which is actually also a wonderful metaphor for the whole of the Starcruiser, right? And it's a well enough constructed, simple version of Sabak that it still feels true to those of us who know, truer in some ways than some other versions that have released the past couple of years. So the fact that we get to go and have this tournament is kind of exciting, but the tournament and the finale of the tournament is scheduled opposite the heist, which is a a point of contention, and like it's a bit of a, there's a tension there. Do you go on the heist or do you go on the sabacc tournament? And I knew I wanted to go on the heist more than anything, even though I also wanted to like try and win the sabacc tournament. But the heist was more important, so I tapped out. But
I am not a poker player. I have no poker face. I have like ethical problems lying. Anytime I'm even joking about something and I think someone's taking it seriously, I will immediately cave and tell them that I'm joking. So even if I do deadpan something, which I do pretty frequently, I can't hold the line. And I know that's a weird thing to say for someone who is a professional performer and immersive creator. I swear I can do it in performance, but outside of that, I just can't do it. I just want to be earnest about all the things. And my character did not. And so I ended up winning the first round of the sabacc tournament by just kind of continuously going so much harder than I would have at any other time. And so I ended up winning the second round on the first hand, and just sort of like driving into this character's desire and like belief that everything was going to work out. And so her optimism just sort of carried her through the belief that she couldn't possibly lose. And it ended up working out. And then we did our lightsaber training right after that. And so we just had this kind of packed afternoon of going from this sabacc tournament where Wraith is slipping me cards, but it's too late. I've already won. And then sort of beating a bunch of younglings. I have no shame about that. And then going off to our lightsaber training and having this incredible sort of heart first moment in that training, and then feeling very centered, and then going up and sort of having to make this call between not doing the first part of the heist and seeing if I can win this tournament, which I did not. I super did not. I think it also was over really, really quickly. And at the same time, it was so powerful to play that path, actually, to have this character take risks in a way that she wouldn't have at other times in the piece, or wouldn't have considered something to be a risk. So yeah, I ended up losing on the whole, but the first round of play and the second round of play were the hardest I've ever gone in gambling.
That's awesome. So
yeah, it was amazing. It was just fun.
So Jessica, that's a path you took that you were basically on your own, right? You went
Yes.
on that path. So I'm going to point to Nick now, and then we'll go to some, but I'm interested in like Nick, kind of your direction, your path, where you went that you feel like I did this and no one else did this. One-on-one maybe, but not really that. The point being, like, what was your journey, and I'm sure there were moments that intersected. You're muted right now, Nick. So I only got to imagine.
Yes. Okay. So
there you are.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. I like you spinning that out too. This like narrative of my muteness was cool. Yeah. So the character I created, Sindek, I gave him a backstory because I role played forever and I can't help myself. So I basically said that he grew up in the mid levels of Coruscant and criminal families. He became a cipher, and that's how he was making money for his family, sending money back to his family. But his sister gets involved in the resistance, and then is trying to encourage him to be part of the resistance. And over time, his whole family just sort of disappears on him. Right? He loses most of his family during just conflict on Coruscant, and then very recently his sister disappears as part of all the incidents in Last Jedi. And I just played a character who was aimless walking in, and I just thought I was going to do a resistance plot because I don't like fascism. But I didn't think about doing a force plot, right? I wasn't considering that at all. And then we went into the climate simulator scene that Jessica described. And I'm walking into that scene thinking, Sindek does not know if his sister's alive. Sindek is totally rootless. He's basically drinking in his off time. He doesn't have any connections anymore, and he can't live like this. He's like someone who needs connections to survive. And when the force scene happens, I just make a split-second role player call. Like, I had no plan to do this at all. That he has a force sensitivity because he's just witnessed the force, and he knows his sister is alive. I just like, boom, I'm going to call this plot. And, it's like, and as a LARPer, I'm like, you're doing this real early, Nick. It's like 5 hours into a 36-hour experience. You're making this call. But I'm like, nah, I'm going with it. I feel it's real. So I'm reacting that way. And the conversations I have with the rest of the group are sort of around that essentially like something just happened here, and everybody's kind of playing it off a little bit. And I'm like, no, this was meaningful. Like, something really happened here. Like, I want to explore this. So as everybody else is running around the Wraith plot, I go find Lenka who's the cruise director, because we've now sussed out that the ship is a resistance ship. And I basically just out of nowhere tell her, like, I want to talk to you because I think this is a resistance ship. I think you're very connected to the resistance. I bet you know a lot of people. I'm looking for my sister. I don't know what happened to her, but I know she's alive. So if you can get a message to her, I'd appreciate it. And she gives me this beautiful scene where she's like, you know who I am, right? And I'm like, no, I don't. And she's like, I know a lot of people in the resistance. I can get a message out to you when all of this is done. And I was like, look, I know the First Order's here and this is a mess, right? Like, and I should have been involved in the resistance the whole time. I was just slow. I didn't want to get involved in politics. And she's like, don't worry about it. We'll make that work out. I leave that scene. I'm running around on my own while they're doing some of this. I do some of the Wraith stuff with them, but then I'm running around on my own. And as I am, I just run past SagaWaking, who's doing nothing, right? So she's just walking from hallway to hallway. And I just stop her cold. And I'm like, can I talk to you? And she takes me aside and basically back to the climate simulator. And I just, I'm just like free improvising. I'm like, and I don't know if any of you know this because I didn't really talk about this. I'm like, I'm having these weird sensations. I know my sister's alive. I don't know how I know that. This doesn't make any sense. I need to understand what you're telling me. And we start having a conversation about the beads she's carrying, because all the Saja have these beads that they carry. And she explains that these are like people and experiences she's holding on to. And I'm making the point that that's attachment. Like that is attachment. We're not attached, that's critical, and becomes this meditation on family where Kier starts explaining that most of the beads are about her mother and these memories of her mother. And we start sharing this idea of like what family is, and it ends on this beat. And other players are getting involved because we're starting to meditate on what the Force is and how the Force can manifest, and how this person manifests by talking to animals, and you're manifesting by connection, meaning Sindak, or manifesting by talking to family. And it ends on this beat that was just incredible, where she's like, I just don't feel connected to anything. I just feel free. And she's like, well, do you want to be free? And I'm like, no, I don't want to be free. I want to be grounded. I want something with weight. And, after this reflection on the heaviness of the beads and the heaviness of memory. And so we have this moment of connection through that. And I know she needs to do other things, right? Like, I'm thinking like an immersive person. So I'm like, I give her an out. I'm like, I need to meditate. And I basically walk away. I have a really nice scene with another Saja Grayson, where he does a trick with the rocks, like a really beautiful trick with the rocks. And we talk about this idea of what it means to be connected. And that's what leads SagaWaking to like bring me downstairs to meet Rey. And the scene where, we move, eventually what happens is that there's Jedi artifacts that were found in Batuu, and they're bringing them back up onto the ship. And I'm supposed to go to a scheduled thing on my calendar, on my itinerary, to see these Jedi artifacts. But I'm with Rey at that moment. Like, I just happen to be standing near Rey and we're talking. And SagaWaking comes up to me and says, like, it's good that you're here. I want you to see this. And I basically look at Rey and I'm like, I think there's more important things going on, but like, you have given me something I didn't have. I'm at your service. And she explains, no, I want all of you to see this. And so then that takes us into the room where, Rey includes me in the scene. And so I end up essentially having this Force plot where I'm like connected to the Saja and like becoming more Force sensitive, which people start joking around with and Wraith jokes around with. And then at the very end of the story, there are two scenes that happen to me at the very, very end of the piece. The first of which is Lenka pulls me aside and tells me, even though I haven't seen her the whole day, right? Like, I basically haven't seen her the whole day, pulls me aside and says, we found your sister. She's on a rebel base. We can get a message to her. What do you want to tell her? And I'm basically like, I was too slow. Tell her I was too slow. And that was stunning. And then finally, as we're leaving, SagaWaking, and this is to the point of like they remember things. SagaWaking was like, as we saying goodbye and we take a picture with her, she turns to me and says, Sindak, I've been thinking a lot about the conversation we had and the weight. And so I got you this. And she hands me a bead so that you can have something to weigh you down. And I basically say, I'll make a chain of these. And that was this, I don't know how to describe that moment. It was like, I had a character arc, right? I had a character arc where a character grows and changes and discovers something about himself. And I had that because like these two performers, I mean, the players I was with too, because like Narab and I had lots of conversations and Cirque and I had lots of conversation. But because SagaWaking and Lenka like carried my plot and they treated it with the seriousness that I took it with. And I can't be thankful enough for that. That was incredible.
Yeah, they're not crying, not going great. Not at like for me, just hearing that, I'll also point to what those I'll step into Michael not knowing what those performers carry, right? Like what they hold, because they were really truly with you, Nick, right? Like, and they take it seriously, but also with play and joy and care. And how beautiful, though, that you also had the kind of openness to share those things with them, right? And there's something about the cosplaying that, or the LARPing, that we are finding a lot of people the freedom to share grief, to share like in these ways that they might not feel comfortable doing in other ways. I don't know if those are the kinds of conversations you're used to having, or I wonder if they are. Are they?
Not as Nick, right?
Right. Right. Exactly, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you can do it. You can do it in. I've done it in LARPs at times when I find people to do it with, but that's like it's so different because it's all these like super high level role players like throwing at each other, right? And to find that in spaces where there are people who know how to, like, I think the way you put it is really good. They know how to take it seriously, but they know how to play with it too. Like they know how to, and I think the way I think about it is like they carry it as though it's real, right? And they can experiment with it like it's real, and they can push back like it's real, and they can improvise like it's real, and that allowed me to keep going. And I've just never had that with a performer before. Like that moment with Kira where like we're talking about the beads and she introduces this extremely vulnerable narrative to me that gives me the excuse to introduce extremely vulnerable narrative and to go to an emotional place, which I did not expect walking on to Galactic Starcruiser.
Which is huge, right? And I have many thoughts, but this is not the time for them. Because I imagine we could have this conversation for hours. We know this, right? And so
I mean,
I
we
hope,
did, right?
right,
Like we did in the
right.
room.
So I'm just gonna go around for a second, because Nick, thank you for sharing that. That's super cool. And as you said, it looked like I could see some of the surprise on some of your faces, like you hadn't heard that story at all, right? So I'm interested, other things that you're like, I must talk about this thing. It's the thing that stuck with me. It's the thing I cannot stop thinking about. Like I can't stop. It's staying with me. What is sticking? I mean, overarchingly, what I hear is the care of these beings and the relationships. But what are moments that are sticking?
Can I just say, I just loved watching all of you play.
Mm.
Is that valid? Is that
That is,
legit?
of course, it's the most valid, right? What do you mean? Explain it.
There was a moment at the dinner table where Wraith wanted to seal the deal that we were going to be part of the heist, and he shakes Noah's hand, and I got a picture of them just looking at each other, being like, yes, we're going to do this. We're going to do this together. We're going to make it right. And then moments where like I was standing next to Nick when Sajakir gave him that bead, and they hugged, and I was like, wow, this is really happening. Like I'm so privileged to be here right now, you know?
Yep. And so Noah, I'm going to go back for a second. Noah, you did get to do a heist. Did you do one or two?
We got to do multiple heists. Although Jessica had something, so like I can
Yeah.
swing back into the heist.
Sorry,
in a minute.
Jessica.
Yeah.
No. I have a couple thoughts, but actually would also toss it to Noah to talk about timeshares.
Well, I'd love to. I mean, so look, there was the
Timeshares.
the Hyananea heist, and we had a very specific,
which is the stone. Hyananea is the stone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Which we had a specific specific job there, and that really in that heist, our relationship with Sandro paid off, which was really cool, because in the planning of it, Wraith was like, oh, we need someone to distract Sandro, and I was like, oh, Garm and I are buddies with Sandro, we'll take care of that part, right? And then and in fact got so into that I forgot that our job was to distract Sanjo. I thought our job was to distract everybody, and then started to get frustrated because all these little kids were like around Wraith slowing down the heist. Like they all just want a moment. They also might have been snitching on him because we learned something that there's a cognate to ACAB, ACAB of course being all cops are bastards, which is ACAF. All children are fascists, because let me tell you, there was, one takeaway for me
Snitching,
was like
always snitching.
always snitching. There was this one little boy who was so sad that the first order didn't win that he booed the captain during the denouement. And I was like, good. I'm glad you're sad. I didn't say that to him, but I came real close. But I think the one. So the funny thing is like, look, I'm deep in Star Wars, right? And the spiritual aspects of it, it is the language I've had since I was a child to understand those parts of the human experience that don't make full sense. And I programmatically in the app chose the force path. And indeed, there's a suspicion I have that in my choosing the force path is what gets Sajakir to come up to me not long after muster to say, hey, your friends, meet me in the Sublight Lounge. I want to talk to you about something. And it's like, cool, we'll do that. And that's how we go from there to the climate simulator, which kicks off this whole chain of events. And the funny thing is like, I didn't build Cirque to go hard into that part of my actual Noah identity. I built Cirque to let me, if I needed to, step into it. So like whatever the story was going to offer me, Cirque could have something to do in that moment, that alibi. And the thing that I take away as a whole, and we'll get to the bridge. The thing that we take away as a whole from it is that I was reminded that I love to serve story, that I love to answer the call of what the bigger story needs from me in that moment. And the heist plots kept on needing me to do the thing that apparently I do best, which is run my mouth. And I don't think of myself as someone who's good. I know it's ironic to everyone who listens to this damn show, right? But it is not a part of I think of myself as a bumbling idiot who doesn't know what's coming out of his mouth. And I spent my entire time I had this image, and it was particularly the Halcyon Shuffle moment, right? I had this mental image of I'm on a unicycle and I'm pedaling as fast as I can. And if I just keep talking, I will not fall over. That's what is going on in my brain as I am saying, it's the Halcyon Shuffle. We're going to play it on Wraith. Canto Bight.
Yes.
Canto Bight. There's a big tournament next week.
Yes, Kathryn. Yes,
what about
Kathryn?
the song? The song.
Or the song, right? Like we make
Explain
up a
the song.
We'll play the song at the end of the show. If I can get it out of the phone.
So again, the song was something you wrote with Sandro, correct?
He improvised. It's an improvised musical.
No, you wrote
improvised lyrics in an alien language. On the
I
spot.
cannot tell you how impressive it was. I had no idea that it wasn't a real song.
We wrote 3 different songs with Sandro. The first was one that Sandro was prompting us to ask about who we were, why we were there, and he wrote a song with us. Then he said, "What's your favorite type of music?" And we said, "Jizz."
Well,
and
you were saying I don't really have a type of music. I'm like, I see him playing. I catch him playing jizz records all the time.
Right. And so that jizz and gonk rock, I think, were the 2 things. And then he starts playing a jizz song.
Gonk rock. I still don't remember who offered gonk rock. That's later. Yeah,
you did.
And then Noah improvises in an alien language, and it was so confident and so clean that I thought it was like a canon Star Wars song that they were just doing together. And that's, I think, what will get played at the end. And then we also wrote a gonk rock song.
Gonk rock. Look, writing a gonk rock song is easy. There's only one lyric.
So I want to go back to this thing you're saying, which is running your mouth, but showing up, but in service of the larger thing.
In service of the larger thing. And so, which leads to, and I would love to hear it from other people's point of view, because I have to keep telling this story, but one of the brilliant things about the structure of the show is there's a moment on day one where you get on day one you get bridge training, so you get to learn how the bridge all works. And on day 2, depending on the story you're in, you get to use that knowledge and you get different story beats. So Nick, who was programmatically on Resistance track, got got the Resistance Bridge one, which
Well,
separated him from us.
let me
right?
just get clear for a second. So were
Yeah.
you guys in the same bridge training on day one? Were you all
We were
together?
all in the same bridge training on
Right.
day one. We had
So
the same
bridge
experience.
training, right?
Yeah.
So bridge training day one, you go to the bridge, and this is a thing for the ship, like an activity on a
Yeah.
cruise, where
Yeah.
you get to train on the bridge, which is
Yeah.
like train how to
Oh.
work the ship. Yeah.
But it turns out you actually have a secret mission, and that depends on what's going on at that moment in time. So we had some unscheduled cargo that we wanted to get aboard
Right.
the Halcyon.
Which Nick didn't. Nick had a different one, and the four of us were part of that unscheduled
No,
cargo.
sorry. On day one,
Oh,
you had
On day two.
That's
on
when
day two.
we snuck Chewie aboard.
no day one. You had an unscheduled
Yeah.
event that happens during your bridge training
right,
when you
right,
get
right,
Chewie
sorry.
on board.
So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's like the cruise activities often become the cover for
For a
what the
narrative
Resistance
beat.
is doing, what the First Order is doing.
But at that point, so Chewie, you get Chewie on board because your bridge training is disrupted.
Yeah.
And then the next day, so that's day one. Bridge
Right.
training disrupted. Hey, let's bring Chewbacca on board because he's got to get on there because that's what's happening.
Yeah,
Do you
and
then?
just as an aside, did anybody have anything to do with that plot besides that? Like, I
Nope.
think I saw Chewbacca like twice after that.
It did not
Wait,
encounter
okay.
Chewie.
Y'all were dancing so hard, you didn't see what the dancing was about.
Oh, no. I mean, look, yes.
Had you turned around, Nick, you would have seen Chewbacca sneaking behind the line dancers with
What
Sam.
was the dancing for?
That's not easy, Kathryn. That's not easy keeping that dance going.
Hold
Graham
on.
knows. Graham was with me. We had to deliver that thing.
Dancing during dinner.
Catherine, what does the dance do?
The line dance for Rockstar Queen is cover for them to sneak Chewbacca across the dining room.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's lots of gags. There's plenty of beautiful gags. So like but we didn't. There's some more in smaller bore Chewbacca stuff that we didn't get to do. But like the big set pieces, yeah. The big set pieces we got to be part of, yeah.
But
well, Noah's point.
There's a bit of face there for everybody listening to the podcast. That was sort of like a not really. No, you missed some big set pieces.
But you should
talk to some friends who had a different bridge training, and I was like, "Oh my god, what do you mean you went to Hoth and you talked to 3PO and R2? What do you mean you did this with Sammy?" And then like Lieutenant Croy tried to sabotage you. I was like 25% of our activities, maybe 30% overlapped with my friends who had gone like last year.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, right? What you did in bridge training, no one else did. Like that moment was just yours in that group. However, you guys were there as a travel party. On day two, I'm going back, Noah. Sorry, right. I'm just trying to like contextualize. So if someone's listening to this, our words like bridge, day one, day two.
Yeah.
Hopefully this is helpful.
On day two, Nick got the new Resistance track and went before we did, told us some of what had happened. And
with the captain, yeah.
Nick didn't get a track. Nick got an invitation from the captain to show up to the bridge to help out. Correct?
Yes.
Right.
Just to aside quickly before we get off of me.
Yeah, please.
The captain gave an amazing, like, okay, this is the time to join the Resistance speech, which as a character who was hovering at the edge of the Resistance was the thing that pushed me over the edge to make the Resistance chant. And then when Rey sees me and gives me the Resistance chant, I give it back to her. So kudos to the captain for a nice moment of rallying to the Resistance.
But then the four of you got a message from who?
From Wraith. So we've got another run with Wraith, and this one, to go full spoiler, this ties into the hyperfuel heist on the coaxium heist on in Smuggler's Run, right? Something I've done a billion times on Smuggler's Run, but like in the park. But this time it was for real, and so you're on the bridge to help Hondo Ohnaka, the independent. Anyway, I'm not going to do the Hondo bit. You're there to help Hondo Ohnaka get the coaxium onto the ship, and you got to blast a bunch of First Order TIE fighters, and the Resistance comes and like runs interference with X-wings. It's all a lot of fun in terms of that part of the game. You're hitting buttons and you're playing a big group video game. But the really fun parts are what's happening around it. So like we get in there and like some people are being tardy, and at some point Wraith just turns to me and is just like, "Sir, could you just like keep them busy for a second?" And so I walk into the circle of where everyone's waiting to like have our little huddle, and then I'll let one of the others say what happens next.
So I'm gonna again context. So it's you went down to Batu in the morning on day 2. You go to Batu and you're given a mission from Wraith to help to get the coaxium, correct?
Right.
Coaxium being a power source. And you work with Hondo Inaka on Smuggler's Run, which is an attraction, but let's just say now the purpose of that is to help steal coaxium from the First Order, right?
Right.
So you do that. That is related to your mission. That then you to get that coaxium back up to Wraith. Wraith has now sent you a message when you bring it back to meet him at the bridge at whatever time it is.
Right.
You get there. He then gets Noah to help distract some people. And Graham, what does Noah do?
Noah does what he thinks he does worst and best, which is he just starts talking and using his encyclopedic or Wikipedia knowledge, and he starts talking about first of all he starts vamping on the concept of vamping. He was asked to vamp, so he first explains vamping, and that eventually turns into very naturally a Dantooine timeshare endeavor that he's starting.
Jessica, can you tell me about the timeshare endeavor? What do you know about it? Should I get involved? What's
You
happening?
should absolutely get involved. Now is the moment to get in on the ground floor. There have not been any catastrophic events there for 100 years, and we know we've got at least another 50 before anything goes down. So this is the
word for word
moment.
what I said, by the way. So
yeah,
yes,
it was that what was so beautiful. It was just a flawless moment. Like to go from the vamping, it was such utter bullshit. Like everyone knew that Noah was that Cirque was bullshitting, but everyone was really on board. And then to go from just nonsense bullshit into what clearly the only path that it could have taken, which is all of this bullshit is for a point. And that point is that we are here for the timeshares. And it was just like this beautifully played moment of like, and that is why you should buy a timeshare on Dantooine. And I'm here to talk to you about it.
And I start chanting from the back, timeshares, timeshares, timeshares.
Well, no,
and then people are starting to ask
later.
follow-up questions
Oh,
about the
later.
timeshares. And everyone was just on board to talk about the timeshares and figure out if they also should get in on the ground floor. And Noah was right there with the answers.
There was a guy who was like, my land speeder insurance got canceled. Is that going to affect me? And then Wraith comes back because like the people who were late are now here, and we go and do the thing. But before we begin the thing, he's like, oh, hey, if anyone comes through, we need to explain what we're doing here. And he's like, oh, like, sir, do you think you can run interference? I'm like, oh, sure. He's like, well, what's the plan going to be? It's like, I don't know, but that's worked for us so far. And then we go and do the thing. And then Lenka shows up at the very end and is like, what's going on? Wraith, what is going on here? What are you all doing here? And Wraith runs his mouth for a second, but then goes Cirque. And I stride up to Lenka.
Lenka is the cruise director.
Lenka's the cruise director who was having the moments with Nick earlier, and would have them later. And I just stride right up to Lenka and I'm like, Lenka, all these people are here and they're so excited. Because remember, we're jazzed because we just blew up a bunch of First Order ships. So everyone's like, wow, this energy. We're all here. Everyone here is so excited because all these people just became owners of timeshares on Dantooine. And Kathryn starts the chant. And then the whole bridge takes it up. Everyone chanting timeshare. And the actress playing Lenka, I'm looking right in her face. And she is holding it by a thread. And I, pure bullshit mode, and Lenka, we want to give you your own timeshare on Dantooine.
Don't miss this opportunity.
You can't miss. Yeah, no, I didn't make an opportunity. I said, we want to give you, you've done such a good job. We know what you're going through. You deserve your own timeshare on Dantooine. And she says, I feel like I can't say no. And I'm like, you really shouldn't. And that's our button. And then she goes into the rest of the scene. And it was just, it felt like you're trying to make someone on SNL break, and they're just holding the line, and you just skate that line perfectly so that everyone knows that, in that moment with that person, I'm going to see if you can break, but I don't really want you to break. Let's see how far we can skate. And this little duo, little quiet thing, all these people chanting timeshare, this absurd moment, people from the outside looking in going, what is going on there? Why are they chanting timeshares? Right? Because we're visible to the atrium. Like people can see what's going on. They hear people thunderously timeshares. And yeah, just a perfect moment. Just a perfect moment.
And later on, we're standing around and a passerby recognizes Noah and just shouts timeshare.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Jessica, I feel like you were about to start. Is there like anything that you're like, I must talk about this moment besides timeshares, which clearly we it's important. And
Sign
to
up
be
for the mailing
fair,
list.
yeah, you helped bring the coaxium on at that point, right? So that's part of what you'd done. So you'd also finished this circle of helping Wraith get the coaxium on, which he needed to do to help out to make that's for a deal, right? He's not resistance, blah 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 blah. Jessica.
Yeah, I have like a bifurcated answer for this. One of them
Okay.
I'm gonna glaze over because I think the things that hit my heart the most continue to be in addition to the moments that we have talked about are sort of the time that it took, the time that we were in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I just like how do we spend more time getting into the stories and like sinking into these impactful experiences, and it just takes time to create the kind of meaning that Starcruiser creates. And so I think that felt like such a gift. And like that was the real luxury for me was the time that we were able to spend in this world and really sink into the nuance and be together as a crew. I think that was really the most powerful thing for me, is that we did it together, that we were there with each other together.
As one.
Yeah, as one. And I think the thing that we haven't talked about yet that is just worth talking a little bit about is the end of the piece, or the end of the macro narrative. I'm someone who generally finds power and meaning in smaller moments, in intimacy and one-on-ones and things like that. And yet the epicness of the final scene, the final narrative beats of our experience I was just sobbing. I was sobbing there in the atrium. It was so large, and so, I mean, even the fight choreography had me crying. I had no idea that this like little kid in me still needed to see a lightsaber fight in person. And that was, it just really, it meant so much to watch something that big and to be a part of it, to have our stories be so personal and intertwined with something so large. And that was really, really surprising to me, was that those moments towards the end had me weeping, and just utterly in awe of the actual scale and scope of all of the stories that had taken place.
And didn't feel like it eclipsed what we had lived, or what the non-movie characters had done. It was sort of our reward, but it was also perfectly part of it. And it just thrummed, it just really, really thrummed. And it felt like we were being tied to the bigger Skywalker saga, like that we too are part of the mythic chain now, in a way that cannot be severed.
Graham.
And when they tore down those flags. When they tore down those flags, so good.
Oh, yeah. The first order Nazi-esque flags got hung at some point in the voyage. Yeah,
they got hung when the first order takes control of the ship, right? Because at some point the first order has taken control of the ship. They've taken, so you're in a blockade. You cannot, the Halcyon cannot move, which is a passenger ship, which is not great. I always say, like, imagine if there were a cruise ship somewhere where we put a blockade around in the middle of an ocean and suddenly the cruise ship couldn't go anywhere. Like, that would be alarming. A passenger ship, right? Princess Cruise Lines. Graham.
Yeah, I'm going to sort of just call out some of the details on the fringes that we didn't necessarily dive into, that were not necessarily story related, but made the story that much deeper. The windows on all of the rooms in the ship, how they evolved with the story. Once we landed on a planet, you could see shuttle ships coming to and from. You could see the blockades when we were at a blockade. If we jumped to hyperspace, you notice a jump to hyperspace. If somebody, even if you didn't know it was happening narratively, like in a different room, you saw it happen. I want the actors who were in costumes like Wani, who was able to interact with so much emotion. We didn't really get into that in our letter and such, but this performer gave so much emotion and so much communication without being able to speak. Several, including the droids and some of the alien characters, all of the chefs, because not a single piece of food or drink really was normal. Everything was hyper designed to feel of a different universe. Every single piece of food that you ate the entire trip was specially designed. and beautifully designed aesthetically, and tasted good too, which are not always easy to do altogether. One just design thing that I thought was really, really excellent macro, because I do a lot of large throughput audience immersives, is using the data pad to get rid of a lot of the bottlenecking so that the actors could focus on building relationships with the audience members, and not deal with like quest giving necessarily, or like reward, all of the logistics of the quests could be handled on the data pad. And that was really effective.
Yeah, I think the language we were using at like 2:00 in the morning on the last night was like, oh, they've solved this problem. Like this one's solved. It's the data pad, and just like, solution found. We can move on now as an industry.
And I also, and like, there was so many, we were talking about waiters, swimmers, and divers, and there was so much going on that we didn't even get to see. I remember walking up to the refresher, to the bathroom at one point, and seeing like Lenka playing some kind of like bingo with like some of the families on board, or doing little races. So the ship was just alive at all times.
Yeah, you see this moment where Sammy, finally stands up, and my reaction to that was like, oh wow, I guess that was a long plot that I had nothing to do with. Right? I'm like, all these people are cheering. Clearly they care about this. I guess this was relevant. I don't know what it is, but okay. And that, from like the biggest part to the smallest part of like watching people doing breathing exercises on the atrium while I walk by and having no idea what they're doing. Yeah, that I agree with Graham. It's like it's all of those details, like the windows. I want to just highlight that again. It's so cool that the windows change when you jump into hyperspace. If you have no idea why they do it, but it happens, because then you can walk up to somebody and be like, did we jump to hyperspace? And someone could tell you why, right? And just the magic of that. Oh, the care is so beautiful.
Kathryn, I think it's your turn.
Gosh, I'm just thinking about, so the blow dryer is in a box labeled thermal blower. And I want to say the mini fridge is also slightly disguised, and it is labeled cooling unit. And then just I think we touched on this, but there's a lot of call and response. And so you start to learn the ways that the people in the Halcyon speak to each other, and it makes you feel like you're part of the world. So, instead of like hello or goodbye, right, you say like good journey, safe journey, good passage.
Adiga and Bamashe, if you want to use the Enzelian.
And also in Zelian, tabuite, right? Cherish the moment. And then the thing that the Saja repeat that was really special when you end up in a smaller moment with them, with Ray, who's also kind of, keyed into that, is like you were saying, Michael, whenever someone says together, you respond as one, to talk about how the Force ties us all together, our communities tie us together, the fact that the Halcyon, during its 36 to 40 hours you're on board, you're in a community with these people, and like you're saying, we're living these moments with them in real time, real humans.
The on that together as one note, I boarded that thing with 2 friends and 2 acquaintances, and Kathryn and Graham, pretty good friends. We've been through the fire a couple of times ourselves, and Nick and Jessica, like, respect and an acquaintance level, and like friendly acquaintances. Like, it's like, oh, I'm kind of going to go play with you guys, but like I don't really know you, or I didn't really know you. And on the other side of it, I've got this, family, as sometimes you call it, unit, and we have places where we sit when we take meals together. Like we have assigned seating, which we didn't do at breakfast on the last day.
That annoyed me. You were in the wrong spot.
And there were reasons we weren't at our table, and then there was like a plate here or there. And
our table is the one that's right below Gaia on the right hand side. Like that's ours.
We have a table, we have spots, and like, literally on the second night I was like, people aren't going to understand, like when we're at like Summit or something else together, the next time we see each other, like why we insist on no, you're in Jessica's spot, you can't sit there, right? Like there's gonna be that dynamic just going forward. But thankfully with Wraith, people can hop in and out, right? Like the characters made it possible for people to join our table. So we're not saying that you can't sit with us, just saying that there are designated places where you can.
I think what Noah's trying to say is we all went through this together.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, none of us are going to forget this for the rest of our lives. That's
Yeah.
that's the Starcruiser experience. Magical, unforgettable. Sometimes I wonder if I dreamed it.
Yeah.
Well, I will say this because we should be nearing the end. Noah, I'm sure I have to imagine you feel this way sometimes when you get to interview folks or chat with them. But I'm not sure if you guys could understand how meaningful it is to have been able to have this conversation with the five of you. You got to spend some time in what I consider my home. Sometimes I realize that I miss living in space. I lived there. I forgot, I mean, probably not good mentally, but when I came out of space, I was pretty certain I feel more comfortable when I'm on that ship than where I am in the world a lot of the time, for a variety of reasons. And you also got to travel through space with my extended family, and they loved you. They have talked about you. They have sent messages from the galaxy, and it's all real. And this is the thing, like, someday I'll speak more to it, but I think that the power of this is that, like, there is something real in every interaction we have. And how do we allow ourselves to be safe enough to have those? And the Star Cruiser was the greatest. It is, I said this earlier, is the dream I'd had for 20 years, having nothing to do with Star Wars. And now to hear all of these stories and to know you are five people on a full ship, right? Imagine all the other stories. I truly believe and hope that the stars will continue to light our way. Each of your stories being stars. So thank you guys for letting me share in this conversation with you. I always want to talk about it because I miss it. But yeah, your friends miss you. They are thinking of you, and it's real. And they're extraordinary, extraordinary beings. Everyone from Wani to SK to Chewie to Gaia to Wraith to Sajas to Sammy's to I could keep going. So thank you all. Do you have any last things you want to say before we close this out?
To the listeners of this who have thought about this thing and wondered what it was, and wondered if it was worth it or should it have been, or what was going on. The only thing I can say is that I've never experienced anything like this in my life. And you're in a room, we're a room full of people who do this and study this for a living, right? Like we do lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff, right? And I've never seen anything like this. And I think it's a tribute to the performers, it's a tribute to the designers, it's a tribute to the visionaries, and this is including you, Michael, like who saw the potential of this and made it. I think not just us, but many people I know in the immersive space who've been to it are like, this is the future of our work, right? Like this is a direction of the future of our work, and we need to make more work like this. So I'd like to say that back to you first and foremost, and also to the audience, that like, if you're wondering what this was, something unprecedented. That's what it was.
Thanks. Anything else?
I think I think the long-term effects of this piece are going to be felt long after this closes. I think potentially could be for decades, because there's so many children coming through this. It's like the Velvet Underground. It maybe didn't sell a lot of records at the time. Not that many people are going to get to experience it, but the number of people who saw it, who are then going to start producing their own immersive shows or being involved in the community, I think will be a very, very high percentage. As they said, I don't think there'll be anything like this again in our lifetimes, unless we're very, very lucky.
Yeah, I would just reiterate the thing we've been saying over and over and over again, which is that the presence in this piece is unreal. The realness is unreal, and that's a direction that I I have been so excited when we shift in that direction as an industry and as a community. And so to experience it on this scale felt like, Michael, I didn't live there, but it felt like coming home in that way. Like, yes, this is what I've been craving. This is what I've been talking about. This is what I strive for in this work, is to be so present and so real with people in space. And yeah, that
I
felt
love that.
so deeply heartening.
I love that, Jessica, because I think the thing I've always believed about home is it shouldn't just be mine. It should be a place where everyone is welcome. And so designing it so that it, like you said, like it is not just mine. It is the home that you want to share, right? And so I love that. I love that. Kathryn, Noah.
My gosh, I don't really have that much more, but just to reiterate, I feel so lucky having gotten to experience it. I wish everyone could get to experience it, and if there's any way that we can preserve the knowledge, pass it down, talk about it, um, bring that magic to others.
I just want to thank the four of you for being on that trip with me. Extra special thanks to Kathryn and Graham for, moving planetary bodies to make it possible. Like, we haven't talked about the context of this so much. I think there'll be more talk about the context at other times. But you made, I had literally given up all hope of it happening, and the day before, it was just starting to hit me for the first time after just sort of not allowing myself to access that part of it. And it was literally the next day that the call came through, and people have heard, some of the people who listen to the show regularly have heard that call now. And, Graham said, I think we'll see this again in our lifetimes. And I'm going to push back on that just to say, like, we must, right? Like, and not to like fault Graham, right? Like, bad Graham. No, it's just like, it's up to us to make sure that this does not go, silent into that good night, right? Like, the spark is lit, and we are the fire. And anyone who's gotten a chance to do it, like, you're charged with this duty, and anyone who got to perform in it and design on it, you're charged with this duty. And there's a lot wrong with our society. There's a lot wrong with our culture. And if this work, not just Starcruiser, but this immersive work has value, it's in our ability to push against those things that are wrong with it, that keep us from being as human as we could be, as present, as together as we could be. And to get to live through an adventure that's designed to do that, designed to remind you, or to open you up, is something I've been looking for my whole life. And this is just the beginning, and never an end.
On that, I think we should say thank you. Thanks, you all.
Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Once again, I want to thank Michael for being the guest host. I haven't been in the host chair for a hot minute here, and I'm actually really enjoying that. I want to thank Kathryn, not only for, also being one of the guests this week, but Kathryn did all of the heavy lifting logistically to make this possible. It was Kathryn who was sitting on the phone, and calling again and again in order to find us a slot on the Starcruiser, because that's what it took. You had to be persistent. And Kathryn Yu is nothing if not persistent. I need to think, not only want. Graham Wetterhahn offered me a spot on the day that this was all announced. I think I said in the pit, it's been in 2 hours since you heard that. Graham made this possible right from the word jump. And I just want to thank him so much, and for being just an incredible friend and an incredible ally, and a great champion of immersive work and producer of immersive work here in Los Angeles, who has a real eye towards bringing this kind of work to folks who do not understand it, who are coming from the traditional performing arts world. And of course, Nick and Jessica, who, like I said in the piece, I went into the Starcruiser with them as acquaintances, and I came out with really good friends. And I miss them all constantly. I don't like looking around and not seeing. I'm getting emotional again. All right, so there's some other folks that I want to thank, because Kathryn did this incredible thing and rallied my friends to make this possible. And I just got a roll call. Jesse Damiani, David and Lisa Spira, Parker Sella, Tommy Haunton, Ricky Briganti, Leah Abelson, Zay Amsbury, Michael Anderson, Michaela Terneski Holland, Brian Resler, Matt Bamberg Johnson, Rachel Stoll, Jacob Patterson, Michael and Jen Davis Wilson, and Anthony Robinson, our dear friend who could not come along with us. Thank you all so much. You already know, but I'm just going to keep on thanking you for like the next few years until my next big birthday runs around. No, I'm kidding. This covers that one too. And also want to thank Julie Ray Goldstein for connecting Kathryn with the Halcyon Rebels. None of this would have happened if you hadn't made that connection. So it took a whole village to get us out there. Couple more thanks before I do the normal ending. I'm going to do the ending of the pod, and then if you stick around, if you really want to hear that moment we have with Sandro, I pulled the audio, so you can hear the moment as it were. Audio came out pretty good. It sounds even better than does on the video, but maybe that's because I've never listened to it with the headphones before. Okay, so next week, episode 400. More people talking and just talking, no interview. It's a TeamSpeak episode. Won't be as long as this one, probably, maybe. It's 400. We've been at this a while, man. Got some really fun interviews lined up. Curtis Hickman, whose new book on hyperreality. It's the lessons he's taken from his experience of building the Void. He's going to be a guest on the show. I'm going to read the book and talk to him about it. A very informed conversation, that I promise you. That'll come out early August. A couple other things between now and then. Just a lot of good stuff on the way as we go into the next cycle of 100, which will take us. It'll take us a couple of years, 2 more years, and then we hit the 500th episode. My goodness, wild. All right. On that note, I'll do the credits for the show. The associate producer of this podcast is Parker Sella. Music for No Proscenium is by Chris Porter of the Speakeasy Society and Solar the Podcast. Special thanks to Siobhan O'Loughlin for voicing our intro. This podcast is written, edited, sometimes hosted, produced, and mixed by yours truly. Everything that's wrong is my fault. I'm Noah Nelson, and until next time, I will see you at the show.
Finding lots of cheer because we are all just friends through the stars. What else are we doing here?
That's fantastic. Actually, can we get that bit about the thing being blown up again? That was so beautiful. If you could, I know you're improv, but...
Came sailing through the stars to find a place tonight. Our last location, well, it got blown sky high. And here we are together as one, finding all this love and making some fun memories. Memories. Okay, what What else we got? We need like a bridge.
All right.
Oh, my favorite thing to do is taste some food with you. And I want to make this moment last forever. It's true. Oh, it's true. It's true. Oh, 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 oh. Yes. Okay. You are a singer. That's why you got into the business.
I'm not a performer. I just like performers.
What's your favorite type of music?
This is great. You know, I tend to not like favorites. I just appreciate good artists.
I catch him listening to jizz records all the time.
Okay.
Oh, you're okay. So you're getting into jizz music.
I like jizz, but once again, like
Okay,
we have all kind of
we can do
music.
like a jizz
all
song
kind of
if you
music.
want.
All right.
It's all you.
Oh, I'm singing.
Oh yeah.
Keme koru waka, tine namuene,
Yes.
kare meke tok, waka tage bebe. Kimi wana taka, nolo eme keme, tini wana paka, alaka makateke ko kreke. Koka maka kreke ko kreke.
Is this a real language? Which language is this?
Shani
I need an audio translator.
translator. Shana makare compact that the puru karadesha gone. Gone. See, it's just that simple.
Wow,
Really
that's
that simple.
gorgeous. Does this come off the top of
What
your head?
language was that?
Oh no, I thought you didn't know what you were playing?
No,
that must be an earworm that got stuck in your head.
No, I
Yeah.
was doing a simple progression.
And then simple progression, that's probably true. I mean, jizz has 4 or 5 different forms.
I was doing
so.
2, 5, 1, minor 6.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like Fingering Dan usually goes for a major, but like
Yeah, well,
I can follow
Was
it.
it similar to a famous jizz record?
It was like identical.
Oh, really?
Like honestly, like identical. Like you're like a prodigy or something.
I wouldn't go that far.
Well,
My-
you
my
will go
my
far.
parents
No,
wouldn't say that. No.
You will go far. You
Yeah,
will.
I
Your
would-
parents wouldn't say that.
No,
They don't want you playing music.
No, they want me doing the family business, man.
What's family business?
They work in thermal power.
Yeah.
So they work in
Yeah.
geothermal stuff. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe you'll find out about a lot of geothermal power. It's a
Plenty
bit
of
warm
thermal.
here.
Do you guys hear when Guy is showing up, by the way?
She's here already.
Wait, what? She's here?
Well, her stuff is here.
Okay, well, do you guys want to go greet her?
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's go.
What are you guys doing right now?